Zoning Board of Adjustment, Monday, February 14th, 2022. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open, adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Act in the following manner. First, on December 14th, 2021, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on December 14th, 2021, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on December 14th, 2021, said notice was posted in the office of the zoning board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For any members of the public wishing to ask questions or comment on an application, you will need to use the raise your hand feature when the chairman opens the hearing up for members of the public. Once you are brought into the meeting, you will need to have both audio and video, and you will be sworn in and required to give your name and address. If you are calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself.
Thank you, Eileen. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Cantor,
Here.
Mr. Hughes,
Here.
Mr. Mertens,
Here.
Mr. Moretti,
Here.
Mr. Orozco,
Here.
Mr. Saya,
Here.
Mr. Stanton is absent tonight. Mr. Gonzalez is absent, and Chairman Nansen.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
under God,
liberty and
liberty and
justice for all.
Justice.
Mr. Bayer, you mind swearing in the professionals, please?
Yes. Do you swear that the testimony and information you provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do. The professionals are sworn.
Thank you. Approval of minutes, regular meeting, October 4th, 2001. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Orozco, Sayed, Stanton, and Gonzalez.
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Motion, Mr. Hughes.
I'll second that.
Back on.
Mr. Chair.
Who was the second?
Orozco.
Mr. Sayed, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yeah.
and Mr. Saya.
Yes.
Regular meeting, October 25th, 2021. Eligible voters, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Orozco, Sayed, Nansen. Can I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion by Moretti,
I'll second.
seconded by Mertens.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes. Regular meeting, November 8th, 2021. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Sayed, Nansen. Motion.
Make a motion.
Motion by Moretti,
Second,
seconded by Orozco.
Hughes.
Hughes.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes. Regular meeting, November 22nd, 2021. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Sayed, Gonzalez, Nansen. Motion.
I'll make a
Make a
motion
motion.
to approve.
Motion by Hughes.
I'll
Second,
second it.
who's second?
Moretti.
Ready. Okay, can we have a roll call,
Miss,
please?
yeah, Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes. Okay, regular meeting, December 6th, 2021. Eligible voters, Cantor, Mertens, Moretti, Sayed, Nansen.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mertens,
I'll second.
second by Sayed.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes. Regular meeting, December 13th, 2021. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Orozco, Sayed, and Stanton.
I'll make a motion to pass to approve those, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cantor,
I'll second.
who's second?
Yeah.
Sayed.
Sayed.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
and Mr. Saya.
Yes.
Regular meeting? Oh. Yeah, regular meeting, January 10th, 2022. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Orozco, Sayed, Nansen.
I'll make the motion to approve, sir.
Looking for people to run for council.
Mr. Moretti, you are not muted.
Screwed that up, didn't I?
Yeah. Motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Mr. Sayed.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Orozco,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes. Regular meeting, January 24th, 2022. Eligible voters, Cantor, Mertens, Moretti, Sayed, Stanton, Gonzalez, and Nansen. Do I have a motion?
Make that motion.
Motion by Sayed,
Second by Moretti.
seconded by Moretti. Okay, can we have,
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
yes. Okay. Vouchers,
No vouchers tonight.
correspondence.
I have a few correspondence. The board has to think about going back to regular in-person meetings beginning in April. So they have to let Eileen know what they think about that.
Okay, you want a little open discussion about that, or what, how does the board feel?
I'm all in favor of getting back live.
Yeah, I'm good too, sir.
I think it's about time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Yep, I'm in favor of it.
I'm okay.
okay, Mr. Saya?
I'm all for it.
Okay, I am too. It's about time. I honestly, I don't know how we're gonna feel whenever we're up there, but you know, it's gonna feel very strange.
We'll do fine, sir. I have faith in us.
Yes, sir. How did the professionals feel?
Yeah.
Can't wait. Works for me.
Come on,
Looking
Shay.
forward to
Give
it.
your answer to that.
Looking forward to seeing everyone in person.
Okay.
Barry?
How about you, Eileen?
That's fine with me.
Okay.
I think we're
I
pretty
can't
much
wait.
all on board, sir.
I
Okay.
can't wait.
Only
for
that's because you don't live 5 minutes away, like most of us.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward. Any other
Okay.
correspondence?
Yes, we have a letter from Mr. Hanlon, the attorney for Robert Laskowski, who asked to be carried to February 28th, 2022 with no further notice. He sent a sketch of the new plans removing one of the garage bays to facilitate large vehicle circulation on the property, but due to circumstances beyond the client's control, they were not able to have the revised plans completed. And then we have the engineer for Matthew Lynn could not make tonight's hearing, and he asked if the board would carry the application to April 11th, 2022 with no further notice.
Okay, well, real quick, this Robert Lewowski, this is gonna be the last time that we're gonna move this case. He better be there come that date on 28th, or it's it. We're not moving it again.
Can I ask the date again? I'm sorry, Eileen.
February 28th.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, for case number BA 2106, Robert Lewowski. This case is going to be carried to February 28th with no further notice, the last time. Okay, and then Paul, let me go to Lynn. Last case on our agenda, Matthew Lynn, case number BA 2126. This case will be carried, when is that carried, Eileen?
April 11th, 2022 with no further notice.
Was the 11th, all I got was the 11th.
With an expiration date change, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. When is that carried to?
The 11th, and it's expires on the 5th, so yes.
Yeah.
The 11th of what?
April.
April.
April 11th. And it expired, they need it, did they give us an extension date?
I don't think so, but I'll let Eileen contact them tomorrow.
Yeah, have her get an extension of time,
At least to the end of the month.
end of April, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, case number BA 2126, Matthew Lynn is going to be carried to April 11th at 7 o'clock with no further notice. Okay. Is there any other correspondence?
That's all the correspondence for tonight.
Okay, resolutions. Case number BA 20-104F, Versi 24 LLC. Resolution granting final major site plan. Eligible voters: Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Orozco, Saya, and Nansen. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Chairman.
Motion by Mr. Saya,
I'll say, oh, where is it?
seconded by Mr. Roscoe. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Cantor,
I don't think you can hear me. Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can't see my picture, though.
That's
Mr.
okay.
Hughes,
Yes, yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
and Chairman Nansen.
Yes.
Resolutions memorialized.
Okay. Applications before the board, case number BA 2106, that's, pardon me, Borowski. Case number BA 20-101 F AARS HW. I took that other one as far. Okay, this is a property LLC, formerly Rock Solid. Final major site plan, application of AARS HW Properties in LLC as applicant, and Rock Solid Realty New Jersey Corp. as owner, seeking a final major site plan approval to construct a 368,050 square feet warehouse with office space and associated site improvements to include a parking lot, stormwater infrastructure, new utility connections, light and landscape on premises known as Block 168, Lot 1901, 1910. Proposal new lot 1919, 1911 Fairfield Road. Use variance, bulk variance, and preliminary major site plan approval was granted in 2020. This application was originally scheduled for January 24, 2022, when it was carried to February 14th with no further notice. Expiration date, February 26, 2022. Welcome, Mr. Pate.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, board members, board professionals, and public. Kenneth Pape on behalf of your applicant, AARSHW Property LLC. They are the successor to Rock Solid as the contract purchaser of the property. And this is an application for final site plan approval, as read into the record. And Mr. Chair, I have a brief opening statement, and then I have additional witnesses available to assist in presenting the application. If Louis Zugner and Raymond Walker and Stephen Radosti and Jeremy Lang could be admitted. I don't know that we need all of their testimony, but I have a much higher comfort level knowing they're in here with me. So I thank you for that. And with your permission, I have the following to offer to the board. This is an application for final site plan approval. This received previously use variance relief, subdivision approval, and preliminary site plan approval with limited bulk variance relief in two separate resolutions. And I begin by advising you that the contract purchaser and your applicant this evening is aware of the conditions of those prior resolutions and agrees to be bound to them as if they were the original applicant. All conditions of prior approvals come forward. I also would like to share with you what our clients have achieved since they were last before you. Amongst their commitments to the town was to make an application to the New Jersey Department of Transportation to make improvements to the Route 33 Fairfield Road intersection. That application was filed, and that application has been approved, and copies of the DOT permit have been provided to your offices and are part of the applicant's record. I think one of the most important commitments that was made, there were a number of important commitments, but one of the most important commitments that was made was commitment to bring water and sewer to not only this property, but to the region. And the language is in the record as to what that commitment was. And it was essentially to bring a sewer line from Route 524 all the way to this property and to design it so that it had capacity to provide sewer for the region in which the property is located. And that involved gravity lines, force main lines, and a pump station. Our clients have secured the local approvals for that. They have secured the Manasquan River Regional Sewerage Authority approvals for that. I left off, they designed it. It's fully designed. It's gone through the approval process. First, it went to Mr. Nunziata at the township. Then it went to the Manasquan River Regional Sewerage Authority. Because the Manasquan River MRSA receives federal funding, there's also a EPA waiver that is required for any sewer line. That's a federal release, and that has been secured. And the last step in the application process is to go to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for a treatment works approval, often referred to as a TWA. That application has been filed and is deemed complete. So that the commitment to bring sewer to this area has been followed through. And we recognize that any relief granted by the board, any further relief granted by the board will also memorialize that obligation. Our clients also secured the county planning board approval, Freehold Soil Conservation District approval, and to bring the water is provided by New Jersey American Water Company. It's not a governmental agency, it's a company. You don't make an application, you make a submittal to them, they review your plans, and then ultimately you enter into a contract with them. And our clients have done all of that. All of the materials have been filed with New Jersey American Water Company, and who has confirmed that they have capacity and will provide service. And we're anticipating receiving that. I'll call it an approval shortly. There were a number of DEP approvals that were required, and all of the DEP approvals required for the project have been secured. You'll hear from Mr. Louis Zugner, the design engineer, that there was an investigation of the Ardena Brook stream on the property. And that investigation resulted in the state of New Jersey reviewing the actual location of the Ardena Brook. And you'll hear that permits for establishing the flood hazard limits of that brook are in place. We also, there were a number of variances that were identified in reports by Mr. Cunliffe and Ms. Beam. We are prepared to address them as follows. There was an identification of 2 monument signs on Fairfield Road. We withdraw that request. We ask for 1 monument sign. We're only entitled to 1. So we withdraw the request for the 2nd monument. The monument sign that was designed at 12 feet by 8 feet, and that violates the maximum permitted. We withdraw that. We will reduce that sign to 12 feet by 3 feet. And there was also a location of a fence around a stormwater basin that encroached ever so slightly into a buffer. I reviewed with Mr. Zugner, who will place on the record. We will pull that fence back. We do not want to be asking for any variances. There are some other variances that pertain to the stream corridor, and Mr. Zugner will speak to it, but I believe that we're in agreement with your professionals that those variances are not required, that the design is proper. One last comment, two last comments. The guidance and direction that we received from Shari Spiro, without exception, we find acceptable. And the guidance and direction that we received from Jennifer Beam with regard to architecture, she indicated that there were some additional comments that were outstanding. We will agree that Mr. Radasti, our architect, will agree, and the applicant will agree to work with Ms. Beam to secure her consent on the final details of the building's architecture. I apologize for the long introduction, but I'll ask if Louis Zugner could be sworn. And I'll briefly present Mr. Zugner to you. Mr. Zugner was the engineer who presented this application to the board on the prior public hearings. The board previously heard his credentials and accepted him as an expert. Mr. Chair, would you like to have his credentials on the record this evening, or do you accept them?
Mr. Baird, you think that's necessary?
If Mr. Zugner's been qualified as an expert before the board, it wouldn't be necessary to,
He's been qualified on this case.
yeah. So I don't think you need to burden the record with that. I think I can recognize his credentials and expertise that you previously recognized.
You want to swear him in?
Yes, I don't see him, but okay.
Yeah.
Louis,
Right here.
If I speak, do I show up for you?
There you are. Yes, Mr. Zugner, do you swear that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Just state your name for the record.
Certainly. Louis Zugner, Zuegner.
Witness is sworn, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Pape?
yes, thank you. Mr. Zugner, I'm going to ask, reminding you, this is a final site plan that the details were worked out with the board at preliminary. But if you could do an executive overview of the application and take a few moments to describe the time, the reasons and the efforts and the time that was spent with the DEP to secure the delineation of the Ardina Brook.
Certainly. Would it be helpful if I put up a
Yes, sir.
image or a rendering?
With permission, Mr. Chair, we'd like to put up a rendering. This is an exhibit previously filed with Ms. Urbano last week.
Do you know how that's been marked, Mr. Pape?
Oh, let's see.
Yeah,
Eileen, are you able to read that into? I can't find my,
Is that A16 warehouse facility site rendering? It could be
It is.
A16 or A17, I guess, one of the two.
It's the one that is the 60 scale site rendering. Is that listed there?
Yeah, the list of exhibits doesn't say that.
Yeah, that looks like it's A16.
Thank you.
Thank you. As was stated by Mr. Pape as we opened up, obviously final site plan. And I think the key element is that what we have here before you is substantially consistent with the preliminary. This is the preliminary in terms of building and site. The one site element difference is there's a removal of 8 trailer storage spaces. So we're 8 fewer trailer storage spaces on the site, which really doesn't have much of an impact on the operation, just a few fewer spaces. And if you can follow my cursor, that's over here to what would be the left or south of the building. And then there were a few administrative changes as we went through the overall design. And the one element which Mr. Pape asked me to highlight was the stream corridor. So when we were at preliminary, we mapped what's the Ardina Brook. It was already in a conservation easement. We did that based on available maps that existed. Subsequently, and this was working with NJDEP, we went out to the site and did a really detailed exact location, not just of the alignment of this stream channel, but also the end, which ends at a sort of a hard pipe at a distinct end. And then based on that field delineation, both for DEP and based on your local ordinance. So we established riparian buffers for DEP, which they reviewed. And then we established the stream corridor in your ordinance and the stream corridor buffer, both of which we believe are compliant and meet obviously state and local ordinance requirements. It's slightly different, but we believe it complies.
And those permits are in hand and have been provided to the board secretary and are part of the applicant's record.
That is correct. And the one item I would note also, and you'd mentioned this, Mr. Pape, there as part of preliminary was a fence that encompasses the basin. This is a split rail fence. And on the latest plan, there's a section that extended into the stream corridor buffer, which we can and will move. That's to eliminate any concern at that point.
I'm going to, with permission, Mr. Chairman, I have a series of questions for Mr. Zugner to make the record complete. We did receive a report from Mr. Cunliffe, the first version in January, and most recently a version on February 11th. Louis, I'm going to ask if you have received that report and had time to completely digest it.
Yes, definitely have.
There are technical requirements that are contained. Are there any in there that you would have difficulty meeting, or can you advise the board and Mr. Cunliffe that you can and will comply with the technical guidance and direction?
We will comply with the technical guidance, and we have spent a great deal of time with Mr. Cunliffe thoroughly reviewing this, and we know we'll be able to comply with anything we have not yet complied with.
There's a request that we video and inspect the stormwater system. If you could confirm on the record that the applicant will do so.
We will, and we have actually spent a significant amount of time investigating those structures. We need to still video them, and we will.
And there's a request for a clay liner in the basin. If you could confirm that that will be included.
Yes, and that's because it's a wet basin, and we will include that.
There's a request that we submit cut and fill documentation and apply for a topsoil removal, a topsoil import permit. Did I do it right?
We will work certainly to provide the cut and fill, the amount of soil that has to be moved on site, and then get a permit for any soil or topsoil that has to be removed from the site.
I ask that you'll work with Mr. Cunliffe, Ms. Beam, and the fire and the police department to place the appropriate signage along Fairfield Road to direct and control truck traffic as previously required by this board.
We will.
And that you're familiar with Ms. Spiro's requirements for landscape modification and will comply.
Yes, we will work with her and expect that to be something we will certainly accomplish.
We requested, we advise the board that the lights on site are all shielded lights, and that the physical requirements that were required by the board have or will be met.
Yes, they will be met. All the lighting will be contained to the site.
And you heard me go through the DOT and the stormwater reports. If you could confirm that the DOT permit is in hand, that your office worked with the traffic engineers to secure same, and if you could confirm that the status of the DEP approvals, as I've just described them, is accurate.
Yes, we have spent time with DEP and secured their approval. And obviously with a consultant, the traffic expert, we have obtained approval from DOT for what were slight modifications to the intersection.
Okay. Mr. Chair, well, Mr. Zugner, is there anything further that you have to share with the board this evening?
I think the only thing I would add is that we've at great length worked with Mr. Cunliffe. This site will meet all of the new green development requirements in its stormwater. At preliminary, that was not a requirement here, but the site now meets all of those new requirements.
But you're making reference to the March 2021 new regulations of the state?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further of Mr. Zugner. I'm going to, with permission, ask Mr. Radasti, the architect, to join for a couple of questions to address.
Let's open Mr. Zugner. Charlie?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just want to note that obviously, as Mr. Zugner alluded, he has been in correspondence with my office. I did issue a letter in January. The applicant did do the proper due diligence to address most of the concerns that I had. They agreed to move the fence out of the stream corridor buffer that's required by the township's ordinance, so that's positive. And then obviously just for the board's background information, obviously that's why we recommended this only get preliminary site plan the first time around. There were some things with the off-site improvements, and then also with regulatory items that we wanted to get clarified by the applicant. So they've done the proper means to do that due diligence. So I don't take exception to that. I just want to note a couple other items that Mr. Zugner didn't touch on. Obviously they need to provide an O&M manual as a condition of approval for the stormwater management. And then also, I just ask that the applicant, as part of that, provide like a blanket easement for the basin. So if the township ever has to do any corrective or, anything on that nature, they can do that. As far as the televising of the pipe, I just ask, obviously, that be provided for the board and then the township engineering department's record. And if there is any needed repairs or like lining or anything like that, that the applicant agrees to work those out as a condition of any approval. Do you have any issue with that?
Yes, that was the commitment made at.
Okay.
You carry it forward.
That's fine. What else did I have here? Just to make sure I'm not missing anything else. There was additional comments about over excavation of any potentially, limiting soil layers. Lou, you guys can add some notes to the plans, making sure that's addressed, correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay. Make sure I'm not missing anything else major here. As far as the fire official, he had some comments that needed to be addressed on site as far as fire lanes, Knox boxes. The applicant's confident they can address those as a condition. And then also, for the off-site water main extension for New Jersey American Water, I think the fire chief asked for additional fire hydrants in accordance with I guess the UCC. The applicant has no issue with that.
No issue. If I just may, I recently met again with Chief Lewis to go over all of this with him. We're in full agreement with his requirements.
Okay, and then the last big piece of the puzzle, at the prior hearing, the applicant agreed, obviously, to get all required road opening permits, and then also agreed to resurface the entirety of Fairfield Road from the southerly property line all the way up to Route 33. Just as part of that, I asked that the applicant provide an actual cross-section and grading plan profiles for that entire corridor, just so we don't, I know there was a lot of testimony at the preliminary, we're ameliorating existing drainage issues and things like that. I just want to make sure that whatever the final paving, addresses that, and it's one nice finished product for the township and, the residents of Howell.
Mr. Cunliffe, you brought that to our attention in detail when we were before the board with the prior approvals, the importance of capturing the water that's causing some flooding in the area and managing that water. And also because of the excavation for all of the utilities, the water, the sewer, and stormwater, you asked that we be agreed to the resurfacing of the roadway that great distance. And the answer then was yes. And on behalf of your applicant this evening, it continues to be yes. And we anticipate it will be a condition.
Okay, and then this might actually be for the contract purchaser, but I just want to note it now. Obviously, Louis alluded to the applicant losing 8 trailer parking spaces at the southeast corner of the southernmost parking bay. I just want to reiterate, I believe, I just want to make sure that any of the loading area in the front yard, that's not going to be utilized for parking overnight or anything. There's not going to be any parking of trailers other than in designated spaces. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, and also mindful of recent case law and positions of the township. The trailers will be, when the trailers are stored, they will be stored empty. They will not be used for any storage, material storage purposes.
That is all I have for Mr. Zugner, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Ms. Bell,
I don't have anything for Mr. Zugner at this time.
Jerry?
Yeah, I just wanted to put on record, I saw the Environmental Commission had mentioned about a woodlands management plan. I just wanted to note, since this is a disturbed site, there's really not much out here as far as woodlands. Most of the trees on the site are invasive of the little bit that are there. I requested that they added a note to remove Ailanthus and locust, the invasive species out there as directed when we're at construction. But just to put on record, they are planting approximately 275 trees, which would equal over almost 2.5 acres if they were clearing. So, they're providing more than their share of what they're removing.
If I may add to that, we did the woodland management plan for the entire site when the solar facility was approved. So this portion of the site, which is pretty much completely cleared, was subject to the scrutiny of the board, and a woodland management permit was issued for the entire
years ago. Yeah.
When we did the solar.
Right.
There's been no change. Thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Spiro.
Any questions from the board?
No, sir, I'm clear. Thank you.
I can't see anybody, so.
That was Matt Hughes, just so you know.
Mr. Hughes, any other questions of the board?
Alrighty, none.
None from Cantor.
Okay. Mr. Saya?
None from me, Chairman. I'm still, reviewing Charlie's January letter, and as long as everything in Charlie's letter is being addressed, then I think there's not much for me to ask.
Okay.
But I would ask Charlie, is there anything that he's not being addressed in his letter? Over.
So, Mr. Saya, what I will say is probably approximately half of the letter is just restating prior conditions of the approval, just to make sure it's clear for the record. I think Mr. Pape has re-summarized for the board's perspective that they are obviously acknowledging that any prior conditions of both the use and preliminary site plan, and then also the major subdivision approval carry through, and the contract purchaser agrees, and they're not asking for relief of any of those requirements. One of the comments, or two of the comments that I had, were some of the utility and access easements for the property. Those were already previously recorded with the major subdivision application. They were provided again for record, but Mr. Pape, there was already, as part of the subdivision approval, to remove language regarding utility easements within those. There's no change to that with this application, correct?
That's correct. I did learn, Mr. Cunliffe, that the solar facility actually has two utility connections. They have a fiber optic information line, and they have a power line. And so we will need to keep those in place, or they'll get pretty upset.
Okay. Yeah, and just to re-summarize for the board, so obviously when this first came in, this was one property with a lease area for the solar, and I believe a lease area for the subject warehouse application. We indicated that any additional utilities to that rear portion coming through the warehouse portion would effectively be an intensification of the use and would change the nature of the application that was originally seen by the board. That's why we asked that language to be removed, which the applicant obliged. And then let me just real quickly, I'm looking through my letter and make sure I'm not missing anything else substantial. Mr. Pape, I just had some minor, it was regarding the traffic report. There was some language that was just going to be revised as part of the original preliminary approval. It was just to make the report consistent with the testimony that was provided to the board. The applicant has no issue with that and providing as a condition.
No, I went over it with Mr. Ray and Mr. Kennel, and now that the DOT permit is in place and that redesign is in place, they'll add that supplement to the traffic report.
That's all I have, Mr. Say and Mr. Chair.
Great. So then I have one other question then. Is this a single story facility?
Yes.
It
Yes.
is.
Yes, sir.
So it's fairly large, the footprint. And that's replacing what was previously approved for solar use, correct?
No.
There was solar facilities approved for the front as well as the rear.
Yeah.
And then as a result of state regulations, the size of the solar facility was reduced to that which is built. And this is in place. This is in the area that was shown as solar but could not be built.
Got it. Thank you.
Hey, before you, I don't think we ever saw that as far as the board. That was withdrawn before.
Mr. Chairman, years ago when we did the solar facility was for the entire site.
I know, but that was designed, that was removed, the front part was removed before it came to the board. So this zoning board never saw that application.
If that's, I'm sure your recollection is correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify for the board, so they did come before the zoning board. They got approval to put solar on the entirety of the tract. The portion that's the subject of the warehouse, obviously, as part of their site plan for the warehouse, they agreed to relinquish any approvals for solar on the front portion of the tract. So those approvals for solar, where the warehouse, where the basin is, as shown on the exhibit that's on the plan, that's all been agreed to have been voided as part of the preliminary approval. So, you know, this portion of the front, it's a separate lot. It's
Yes.
its own use, standalone from the solar that's at the rear.
Yes. I just wanted to reiterate, this, our zoning board, we didn't ever see anything with solar in the front whenever it was at the board. That it was all in the rear.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I have 3 quick questions for Mr. Radasti, and that your applicant's direct presentation will be included. May I proceed?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So if we get Mr. Radasti I can't see who's here. Is Mr. Radasti admitted?
Yeah, can we get this drawing?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, sure, Mr. Chair.
Okay, now we can see.
There we go. So Mr. Radasti is our architect. He also was part of the original application and presentation. His credentials were shared with the board. His qualifications were accepted. We'd ask that he be sworn, and if we could follow the same procedure that we did with Mr. Zogner, please.
Yes. Mr. Bear?
It's acceptable from a legal standpoint, Mr. Chairman. You could, if he's been previously qualified, you can accept his qualification as an expert architect.
Thank you.
Do you want to swear, Mr.?
Yeah, let's swear him in.
Yeah, I don't see him, but okay. Is he here?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Do you swear that the testimony you'll give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
Do.
State your name. There you are. Now I can see you. State your name for the record.
Stephen Radasti, Radosti.
The witness is sworn, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Radasti, I have a couple of quick questions. Did you design the building that is before the board this evening?
Yes, I did.
And the building that was presented at the use variance and preliminary site plan and the building that's presented this evening is the exact same building, exact same footprint, exact same size.
That is
correct?
correct. There's been no changes made.
And the building was designed with approximately 368,000 square feet. And that they're in the corners of the building. And now it probably would be valuable to bring up the exhibit while Steve is testifying. In the 4 corners of the building, there's small office elements.
Yes, that's correct. There's a 2,400 square foot office element in each of the 4 corners.
It's my understanding that this building is designed to be to accommodate 1, 2, 3, or 4 tenants, and that the small offices in each corner is to make certain that there is offices available for 1, 2, 3, or 4 tenants. An accurate description?
That is correct.
And if I'm going to talk myself into a circle. No, you also have worked with Ms. Beam in the past, addressing her architectural requirements. There are architectural revision requests by Ms. Beam. I'm going to ask if you could confirm that you have worked with Ms. Beam in the past, that you are familiar with her requirements, and that you can and you will address her requirements to her satisfaction.
Yes, that is correct. I've worked with her in the past on many projects. I will work with her to meet her requests on this project.
Mr. Chair, board members, I have nothing further to present other than to ask the board members to consider favorably granting this final site plan approval subject to the conditions previously agreed, conditions placed on the record this evening. Mr. Zogner, if you could bring down the screen.
Mr. Pape, that was A16 for the record you just showed. It was the same exhibit.
Yes.
Same exhibit, Mr. Barry,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Bell?
I would just recommend that as part of the resolution, if the board chooses to act favorably on this application, my office, Jen's office, and the applicant will review the revised architecture during resolution compliance and it to our satisfaction.
Charlie?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Radasti, I believe the site plans showed 4 AC units at the 4 offices. That's just for the office spaces, correct? There's nothing like roof mounted for the warehouse itself?
Right, so the roof house, for the warehouse, we're expecting the warehouse to be heated with internally mounted heaters that are suspended from the interior structure.
Okay, yeah, so there's no roof mounted like air conditioning or anything like that that would create a height variance or require any screening or anything like that, right?
That is correct.
So anything is just for the small 4 office spaces at the corners and it's going to be screened and everything like that. And then as far as recycling, I think the applicant agreed last time around, all recycling is internal to the building, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, and Mr. Pape touched on in the beginning, I just want to re-summarize it for the board's perspective. So the hang up on the preliminary regarding the signage wasn't regarding the building signage, the facade signage. There's no change to that, Mr. Radasti, correct, from the preliminary?
Yes, that's correct.
So the hang up was also, it was on the number, they granted a variance for the number of signs for what was on the building. It was the issue with the monument signage at the frontage. So the applicant, they already got the approval for the signage, the number of signs. They've eliminated the one that the board had an issue with, and they've also agreed to revise the sign to comply with the dimensions. So I just want to state that for the record, they don't need a variance for the number of signs. It was already granted under the preliminary. And that's all I have from an architectural perspective.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I have none, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Same here.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Saya,
I'm good.
Mr. Hughes?
I'm good, Mr. Chair. Good to go.
Okay. Mr. Pape?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, when we presented this application to the board on the 2 prior occasions, the board considered the application and imposed conditions that were beneficial to the community on this applicant. Those included the DOT permits to reconstruct Fairfield Route 33 intersection, the extension of water lines, the design and extension of sewer for the region, and as Mr. Cunliffe pointed out, the resurfacing of Fairfield Road from our southern border to the Route 33 intersection. Those conditions imposed by the board have all been honored by the applicant. With those conditions carrying forward in any resolution for final, we would ask the board to consider granting final approval this evening. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Baer, now it's time to open to public.
If I may, it's a final, by statute and ordinance, you do not need to open to the public, but we have no objection to it.
Okay, I've got Jennifer calling me real quick.
I'm here. I'm here, Wendell. I'm in the meeting.
You're in the meeting. Okay.
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. So anyway, then what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I believe the applicant, with all the findings of fact, have made positive improvements to the site. I concur with our tree expert that this is 2 for 1 on the tree count, and I think that's we don't see it too much. So I appreciate the applicant working on this, and I'll make a motion to approve this application.
Thank you, Mr. Merton.
I'd like to second that with all of Mr. Merton's observations. I'd like to second that, sir.
Can we get a roll call?
Mr. Cantor,
Mr. Chairman, given that the applicant has met all of the conditions and then some, including planning
La vez sí.
and putting in the new sewer line. And that we already heard from the public the last time with the preliminary, and as I recall, there was no or very little opposition. The neighbor was actually in favor. I will grant yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Mertens,
Yes.
Mr. Moretti,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
The chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna vote yes for the fact that not only all the four aforementioned conditions are being met, but I also view this as a quasi-public-private and endeavor with the extension of the utilities, the sewer, and stuff like that. So I'm grateful for the applicant putting this investment into the town. So with that, my vote is yes.
Thank you.
and Chairman Nansen.
I have to reiterate and say it was all of my colleagues on this board. We've been here a long time, and there's very seldom ever an application that comes in like this to where you get somebody that's willing to give over and give up to the town and put in place structures that actually benefit our town. That's a long way from Adelphia Road or 524 to run sewer line and water line. That's a long way. And I gotta say, kudos to you on putting this in. My vote is yes.
Application is approved.
Mr. Chair, board members, on behalf of our clients, I thank you, and personally, I thank you. Good night.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Pate. Okay, the board is gonna take a 5-minute break real quick before we move over to the next one. And Ms. Beam, okay, I see you now.
The board will take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 8:06 p.m.
Thank you.
The meeting will now reconvene.
I should probably start printing this stuff out.
We all ready? Okay. Our next case on the agenda, case number BA 2114 IPP Solar. It's conditional use variance in preliminary and final major subdivision of preliminary final major site plan. Application of IPP Solar LLC, its applicant and Stavola Realty as company lot 17, and Stavola Construction Materials Inc. lot 27 and 28 as owner seeking a conditional and a use variance preliminary and final major site plan subdivision in preliminary and major final site plan to construct a 23.25 acre area, 4.7 megawatt solar facility consisting of 2 solar panels, arrays, two concrete pads for equipment, 7-foot high chain link perimeter security fence, and gate with 2 associated 26-foot wide gravel access driveways on lot 28 and 17. Additional associated improvements including stormwater management basin, buffer landscaping, as well as additional electrical utility improvements on lots 18 to construct, to connect solar farm to facility on JCP&L electrical grid network on premises known as Block 41, Lots 17, 27, and 28, Victory Road. This application was partially heard on November 22nd, 2021, when it was carried to the December 13th with no further notice. After some additional testimony on December 13th, 2021, this application was carried to January 24th with no further notice. On January 24th, 2022, application was carried to February 14th with no further notice. Expiration date, February 28th, 2022. Eligible voters, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, Orozco, Saya. And I've listened to all of the testimony also, so I certified. And is there anybody else that has certified or that needs to? That's 7. Okay, Mr. Alfieri.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Salvatore Alfieri on behalf of the applicant. As your summary indicated, this is the third public hearing on this matter. We are seeking preliminary final site plan, subdivision, and D variance relief for the solar farm that we are intending to install. Just want to remind the board of a few points that were testified to previously. This is a split zoned property. The eastern section is in the SED zone. The solar use is a permitted principal use. And we did provide testimony previously of the many uses that are permitted in the SED zone, and this is probably the least intense of the uses that are permitted in that zone. The other portion, the smaller portion of the tract, is in the ARE6 zone. That's the western section. It's approximately 8 acres. Solar fields are permitted as a conditional use in the zone. We do not meet 2 of the conditions. We did provide planning testimony to discuss those conditions. One is 65-acre minimum. We only have 8 acres, and a PGM feasibility report is to be submitted. And the testimony was that that report was not applicable any longer for this type of facility. We closed the public hearing and our testimony pretty much in December. There were a few technical points that the board wanted us to address, and we had agreed to present the responses to those questions at the January meeting, which of course was carried to this evening. But since the last meeting, we did also reduce the size of the facility on the western ARE6 portion of the property. And therefore, we will need to introduce additional testimony to explain those plan revisions. Chris Rosati is our engineer, and we're going to start with him. We also have a representative of the applicant who did not testify at any of the prior hearings, and he's going to address some of those technical questions that we discussed in December. And then Jim Kyle is our planner. Although he concluded all of his planning testimony at an earlier hearing, he will likely be called just to confirm that the additional testimony and plan revisions are consistent with his prior planning testimony. I apologize for the long introduction. I'm going to ask that Mr. Rosati be let in if he hasn't been already.
Mr. Rosati.
I'm looking for him.
Eileen. Mr. Rosati?
He's entering the meeting.
Okay.
Kyle's already in there. Does he need anybody else?
Mr. Alfieri, do you need anybody else?
Yes, while you're letting people in, we have Jim Kyle, who is the planner, who I'm assuming he did text me, so he is on. And then Mazir Dalal, who is one of the applicants. And that's Maziar is the first name. Does he show up, Eileen?
Yep, he's on.
Yes,
He's coming over.
he's
Okay.
coming over.
Okay, great. Those are the three. Chris, are you there?
Yes.
Mr. Rosati was sworn and qualified and actually testified at the two prior hearings, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Bear, I'm not sure if you need to re-swear him.
Well, it's been since when, last year? So
Yeah,
let's just re-swear. Sir, do you swear that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Just state your name for the record.
Christopher P. Rosati, ROSATI with FWH Associates, Toms River, New Jersey.
And
I'm sorry, Sal. And Mr. Chairman, if Mr. Rosati's been previously qualified and this is an ongoing hearing, there's no need to go through any of the qualifications.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And can Mr. Rosati be given the ability to share his screen?
Yes.
Okay, does everyone see the colored rendering?
Yes.
Yes.
This colored rendering, I believe, is A34.
Okay.
Colorized rendering prepared by FWH Associates. So the rendering you have before you is basically a colorized rendering, a colorized version of the plans that were submitted with the landscaping shown thereon. So as Mr. Alfieri already stated, the major change to the plans, there's two of them, from when we last saw each other in December, is one on the westerly array phase 2. We tripled the buffer from our westerly neighbor and Victory Road from 50 feet to 100 feet total. That 150 feet will consist of the first section will be 100 feet of the existing trees that we will not touch. Then an additional 50 feet that we will clear, because as we discussed last time, the tree cover is such that there's not much vegetation at the lower levels, say from 0 to like 30 feet in some instances. So we decided to take the opportunity of that additional 50 feet to remove those, the existing trees, and replant that heavily with a 4-season buffer. That would consist of deciduous trees, evergreen trees, and understory plantings. So again, tripling that buffer and enhancing that buffer to make it more of a visual screen versus what was there last time. We still, in our opinion, need that one technical variance from section 188-63E because our closest array element is 175 feet from the property line. And we do not have a 10-foot fence or a berm, but we are showing extensive buffer plantings. The other major change, if you can see where the hand is waving, this is the area on lot 18 where we discussed extensively last time, where we had to clear this area. We were proposing to clear this area due to shading effects that it would have on the lower portion of the phase 1 array. We verified through some survey information that the tree heights in these areas is around 70 feet. And that rule of thumb that the industry uses is 2.5 times the height of the tree to the closest array element to get rid of the shading effect. So in the initial iteration of this was basically just a cleared area, and we were going to do some meadow plantings, and there was extensive discussions, and we heard what the board's concerns was, what your professionals' concerns were. And we redid the plan, and we are showing extensive landscaping. It's basically going to be a tiered approach. We have several zones of reforestation, and the first zone is going to be more of a shrub type planting, and then we'll go on up in size all the way to the final zone along the tree line that will remain to species that will get close to 50 feet at maturity, but that will take, you know, quite some time. So again, we heard the concerns, we heard of the board, the professionals, and the public. So again, increasing the buffer on phase 2 on the westerly array, showing extensive plantings on the, we'll call it the reforestation effort for the shade element, the area that was cleared due to shading. We have the CME letters dated January 2nd and February 9th, where Ms. Spiro had several comments, technical comments relative to both of those planting efforts, and we agree that they are great comments, and we will revise the plans accordingly should the board act favorably. Some of them had to do with better species choices, changing a species of an oak due to a leaf scorch issue. So yeah, we're well aware of the issues now, and we will change our plans accordingly, again, should the board act favorably. Another issue that was discussed at the last meeting was our neighbors to the west and the grading of the area. And I'll have another exhibit, and I believe this is exhibit A31. Now, exhibit A31 looks a little strange, but I will explain it a little bit. So as where the hand is waving right now in this circular area, this is the low point of the phase 2 array. And as we go towards the west, it's our neighbors to the west and going up Victory Road. And you can see the contours kind of stacking, and we're going uphill. And if you see this pink line was shown by our office as the grade break. So we go roughly from elevation 74, 75 all the way up to elevation 81 in the middle of our adjoining property. And you can also see it crosses Victory Road. There's a high point there. Then it goes downhill to the neighboring lot on lot 31, and there's a low point in that area. So as I testified last time, our neighbor to the west, lot 29, a significant portion of that drainage area comes to our site. It goes to that sump area that's on our site. And we pretty much handle that stormwater, and our model shows that zero water leaves our site in the post-development condition, even under the 100-year storm event. In the unlikely event that should there be outflow from our site, it will not go to the west. So you can see right here, our low spot here is 75, then we climb up to 77, and there's a high point in here between the 277 contours. And then Victory Road actually goes uphill to 78, 79, 80, what have you. So the fail safe, or the exit point for excess stormwater would actually go above the 77, 77.5, then down to 77, 76, 75 in the area of the railroad right-of-way along Victory Road, and then it would travel along that railroad right-of-way towards the stream. I have another exhibit that's a little bit more difficult.
Chris, if I could,
yes.
Sorry, if I could just jump in, I just want to,
yes,
for the board's reference. So the contour information that you're showing, is that Monmouth County, like?
This is actually LiDAR topography we got from several GIS services that we subscribe to. I actually have the Monmouth County GIS map, which I'll switch to in a minute. It kind of agrees with it. The Monmouth County topo is in 2-foot contours. This is in 1 foot, it's a little bit more detailed. But to get the overall view, I will switch to the next one, which we were labeling contour map. Now that is A31. I'm sorry, A33, aerial map 2020 showing contours. Now, again, this shows our site. It shows the easterly array, the westerly array with both lots, and then going up Victory Road. Again, we have the same common element where the contours go up, they peak at around 82, and then they go back down to this low point in this area of Victory Road. Our neighbor across the street from Victory Road, it goes up a little bit to a high point of around 80. And then basically at the beginning of the structures is the high point, and then it drains down towards the stream towards the north. So again, the concern of our site negatively impacting our neighbors, in my opinion, we do not impact them at all, let alone in a negative way, in that we do, again, have our sump condition that all the runoff comes to our site, we recharge it on site, it goes into the ground. And under the worst case scenario, which I don't foresee happening, the fail-safe area is towards the railroad right of way, and it will travel along that railroad right of way towards the stream. As you can see how those contours kind of stack and then go towards the stream.
So, and Mr. Rosati, sorry, Saad, I don't mean to cut you off.
That's right.
And just to clarify, and I believe it was in my January 19th letter, obviously you scaled back the scope of the improvements on the westerly portion of the property. You would agree that scaling it back would lead to a reduction in site runoff from the development. So even though you haven't revised the stormwater management report, if the board were to act favorably, any revisions would be obviously to reflect those reduced runoff from the site development.
Yes, 100%. We didn't redo the calculations just for the simple fact that we are actually increasing our wooded area, getting more, I'll call it good runoff curve number, ground covers. So our numbers just by default will go down, but obviously if should the board act favorably, we will update all the calculations to make them coincident with the plans that are shown here today.
So, and then just to reiterate some of the prior testimony. So on the portion that was east of the railroad right of way, I had brought up some concerns regarding, even though you're meeting the reductions, the applicant's meeting the reductions on that portion of the track from their site runoff, the applicant agreed to, as a condition of approval, provide some additional drainage infrastructure in the right of way, tying into some existing infrastructure to provide additional stormwater, collection and possible recharge, right? That there's no change in that.
That is correct.
Okay, that's all I have at the moment, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rosati. Just a couple follow-up questions, please. First, I'm now referring to the colored rendering A34. The western section is about 8 acres in size. Approximately how many acres are going to be preserved through either the buffer and or the replanting?
Okay, so the westerly array phase 2 is 8 acres in size. The initial tree removal is 4.95 acres. The area that we are going to be replanting heavily, where I'm showing with the hand waving right now, that equates to an additional 1 acre of, call it reforestation. So in essence, the total clearing will be 4 acres, or roughly 50% of that lot.
And the western array and western section is part of phase 2 of this project. Is that correct?
Yes.
And phase 2 also would include that small subdivision that we discussed at the last hearing as well?
Yes, and just for clarification, everyone to remember, the reason we are phasing this is the phase 2, where the other lot is getting implemented. That requires a working with the railroad to get a crossing via directional drill of some utility lines. That is a long and arduous path. So we want to separate the two to have the phase 1 independent of phase 2, because we know phase 2 is going to take a little bit longer to due to an outside agency.
And again, focusing on the western section, I had asked you to look at the township's ordinance to determine the extent of clearing that could take place if that lot were developed with a single family home. Did you have an opportunity to review that ordinance, and did you come up with an answer as to what kind of tree removal and disturbance would be permitted?
Yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you for a minute. Eileen, Jen Beam is in the audience. Can you just let her in?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you, Sal and Chris.
Don't let her in. Don't let her in, Eileen.
So under that, the tree ordinance and for the homestead lots, it discusses two types of lots. One that's between 1 and 3 acres, and then the one where it's 3+ acres. Now, for instance, if we on a home lot or a homestead lot of 1 to 3 acres, you're allowed to clear 100% of that lot with no tree replacement. Once you go above the 3 acres, you then have to go through this similar exercise as you would as when you're going to the board for, say, a subdivision or site plan, where you have to, show what you're removing, prove that you're not changing drainage patterns or going to result in excessive erosion or things of that nature. But on the 3+ acre criteria, it's recommended that you save 25% of the trees. So that would equate to, for this lot, would be 6 acres. Again, it's not a free pass to just to clear 6 acres. There are applications, there are things that you have to do and fees that have to be paid, et cetera. But a single family homestead that wanted to put a house on there and potentially farm this lot, the recommendation is to not exceed 75% of the clearing or the 6 acres.
And you've had an opportunity to review the most recent reports. Charlie report is February 8th, Sherry's is February 9th, and Jennifer's is also February 9th. Are there any technical comments contained within any of those reports that you cannot comply with?
No.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the direct testimony. All of the solar operational related testimony we're going to leave for the next witness. That's why we haven't asked Mr. Rosati those questions.
Okay. Can you get the screen taken down?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, Charlie, we'll start with you, Charlie.
The only comment I have, Mr. Chair, that wasn't touched upon in so the 2 letters Mr. Rosati referred to were supplemental, which pretty much update my original letter, June 27th, revised up to December 13th. I talked about a 2,000-foot downstream analysis. So I just ask that as part of if the board rules favorably on the application, obviously Mr. Rosati provided testimony regarding for that area west of the railroad right-of-way, how it overflows and continues down the railroad right-of-way down to, I think it's, I don't think it's Muddy Ford Board. I forget which actual brook it is back there. But they provide a 2,000-foot downstream, just indicating that that's the flow path and no negative impacts, and just backing up the testimony provided to the board at tonight's hearing.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Jennifer?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. In our February 9th letter, had indicated that the applicant had substantially improved the landscaping. And while I defer to Shari with respect to species, that bottom piece was very important to myself and the board, and the applicant has provided significant landscaping, so we have no open items.
Sharon?
Yeah, like Jen said, they definitely improved the landscaping, and as long as they're okay with changing some of the species, I'd want to switch to. I have no further, questions for them.
Okay. Board member, Mr. Cantor. Mr. Hughes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have a kind of a clarification question for myself. We've been through a few meetings. I think Mr. Rosati would be good to answer this. The SED portion of this, so the yeah, the east side of it. If the other wasn't involved, would you guys be here now?
If the other side was, no, we would
Yeah.
not, because that's a by right area, so we would just go to the planning board for that.
Okay, that's all I wanted to clarify
Yep.
in my head. Thank you.
Mr. Moretti.
Yeah, this question is for Jen. I was just wondering if we don't approve this tonight, is there anything else that could be put into that location?
So on the SCD side, which Mr. Rosati is correct, the solar array is a permitted use. There are a number of industrial type uses that can go in that location. On the ARE6 side, one house, because it's 6 acre zoning. So as of right, one house, and Mr. Rosati, you can correct me if you don't agree with anything that I'm saying, can go there, but I do believe the applicant is correct in his assertion that a homestead could go there or a farm could go there, which wouldn't limit the clearing. So I know there's concern about the clearing. So I just wanted to put that on the record that it would be one house, but 75% of the property, or 6 acres, I think, Mr. Rosati, you said 6 of the 8 acres would be able to be cleared as part of that homestead.
Correct.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Saya.
Chairman, my question is relative to the New Jersey natural gas connection, right? Is the solar panel undersized, oversized?
Our next, Mr. Sapp, I'm sorry to interrupt. Our next witness will be able to provide that answer. I'm sorry.
Okay, so if you're going with a phase 1 and phase 2, does phase 1 get the job done? Should phase 2 never get approved? Or are we going to have to come back to the table? Hypothetically speaking, this is what we're looking at, right? And if the Federal Railroad Authority does not want something coming across it, which can be very, very touchy, never know what happens with that. Where do we wind up? What's the potential for us to wind up somewhere else? So that's my concern, sir.
So, Mr. Alfieri, if I heard you correctly, you have another witness that you're planning to get testimony that's going to discuss the New Jersey natural gas demand and how this relates to what the demand is. And then I think Mr. Say at that time, because I totally understand, and you've been asking this question now for several meetings, so it's not like this should be a shocker to anybody. At that time, that question, I think, either will be addressed by what they present, or this individual should be able to hopefully answer your questions and address, hopefully, your concerns.
Yeah, good. Mr. Roscoe. Mr. Orozco.
Jose, you're muted.
Jose.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay.
I'm listening.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Alfieri.
Yes, we're now going to call Mr. Delali. Ms. Eric, are you there?
Yeah.
Hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we hear you.
Mr. Bayer.
Yes, Mr. Delali, do you swear that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Menzia Delali, D-A-L-A-E-L-I, and I reside at 140 West 69th Street in New York City.
And Mr. Delali, I'm sorry I mispronounced your name, Ms. What is your relationship to the applicant?
Sure. I'm going to give you a quick background. So I'm one of the co-founders of IPP Solar, the applicant. I co-founded the company in 2008. Over all these years, we developed and installed about 70 commercial and industrial solar arrays like this one. We don't do residential. We're focusing just on commercial and industrial. And I've been involved myself intimately in all the project development aspects of all these systems we got installed. So I know the topic quite well. I'm not an engineer, I'm a business person, but I have been involved quite deeply in technical aspects. And we started this project about a couple of years ago as what seemed to be a pretty exciting project, because we're trying to get a big gas company off fossil fuels. And so I'll be very happy. Hopefully I can address your concerns here and get every questions answered.
So the first question that was raised at the last meeting and then followed up on this evening is the energy demand of New Jersey Natural Gas and how this project would serve that demand.
Sure. So the process is always the same when we approach this kind of project. We always ask for the past 12-month electric bills. We look at the annual consumption, and then we size the solar system based on the past 12 months consumption. And one of the rules in New Jersey developed by the BPO is that you cannot build an array that is larger than 110% of the past 12-month consumption in kilowatt hour. So we went through that exercise with the New Jersey Natural Gas plant, and we looked at the data actually in the past 3 years, I believe, because there's a lot of seasonality. Cold winter ask for a lot of gas, warmer winters ask for less natural gas. And the data has suggested annual consumption ranging between about 4.5 million kilowatt hours all the way to something like 12 million kilowatt hours. And the solar system that we are proposing here, which amounts to about between east and west together about 4 megawatt DC, will lead to an annual production about 5.5 million kilowatt hours. So we are really on the low end of the annual consumption of the New Jersey Natural Gas plant.
So how would New Jersey Natural Gas supplement any deficiency?
So the solar array is technically behind the New Jersey Natural Gas meter. And so the plant is supplied by both the solar array when the solar array produces in priority. And if there is no solar production, of course, at night, then it pulls from the grid.
And so to answer the question of the board member, if for some reason you cannot get approval to cross the New Jersey Transit line and the west is never developed, what impact, if any, would that have on this project as it relates to New Jersey Natural Gas?
The plant is just going to get less solar energy. It will continue to work. It's just that, you will have a smaller system with less of a offset coming from solar energy.
And there was also a question about batteries or other types of systems that could be used to potentially minimize the size of the arrays. Can you comment on that?
Yes, that's actually an excellent point. And, we happen to have quite a bit of expertise on the topic. We built the first energy storage system, commercial energy storage system in the state of New York, coupled with community solar, feeding also Tesla superchargers. So we know, and we had a very nice ribbon cutting with Governor Hochul. It was a landmark project for us. So we know the battery systems pretty well. Batteries actually could make sense, but they don't generate energy. They just store energy. So the ideal scenario is to have batteries for use at night. But you're not going to produce energy by just using batteries.
And there was also a question about another solar array or field on Route 5, on or off of Route 547, and whether that could service New Jersey Natural Gas. Did you look into that as well?
Absolutely. And, it's very simple. When you do that, like I said earlier, the analysis of the past 12 months, you get the electric bills from the customer. And if there is an existing solar array connected to the service, it will show on the electric bills. I have done this many times. And when I looked at it, there was no other solar system connected. It wasn't on the bills.
Okay. And one final question was, one of the board members or maybe a member of the public asked about potential pollution caused by the solar arrays, and what is your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the concern, but no, there is no evidence of that. And the best proof also is I invite everyone to do research on the web. Simply, there is a large number of solar array called floating solar arrays that have been installed even in New Jersey on bodies of water, including drinking water. So you can imagine that if there was any remote concern about the toxicity of solar panels and with the rain, such projects will never see the day.
That's all we have, Mr. Chair, of this witness.
And Mr. Sal, I think there was one other point that had been brought up, and I think it's about recycling of the solar panels.
Okay.
So yes, and look, I did not get into this business to pollute the planet, to be honest with you. And I can tell you that the solar business is not an easy business. There are a lot easier business to make money. So solar panels, yes, there are going to be millions of them. And there are two ways out of it. One is there are large majority of a solar panel, 85% or 90% is made of aluminum, glass, and silicon, and they are all fully recyclable. So that's one point. Second point is that many states, especially those that have the highest amount of solar, such as California and even New Jersey, have put in place agencies and rules in order to make sure that these solar panels don't find their way into landfills. And I think that as solar grows in popularity, you will see stricter and stricter rules in order to make sure that these panels are just not going to end up in landfill. Finally, I should say, and I invite everyone to look over the web. It's very easy to find a secondary market for solar panels that it is very healthy. There are many countries in the world that cannot afford, let's say $100, $150 per solar panel right now. Those panels in the secondary market, the older panels that are 10, 20 years old, they go for $5 or $7. And there are lots and lots of people in the third world countries that would love to get those solar panels and get electricity at their home or for their well or whatever.
Thank you. Thank you. We're prepared to answer questions on these.
Sure.
Ms. Ear, if I could just ask a couple clarifying questions. So I just want to just reiterate the numbers you put on the record. So for the New Jersey Natural Gas, you obviously said it depends on the year and the type of seasons you have during the winter. But I think you said their demand ranges from 4.5 million to 12 million kilowatt hours per year. Is that accurate?
That is correct. That's what yeah.
And then for the current proposed iteration of the facility, you said the maximum output was 5.5 million kilowatt hours per year. Is that correct?
Yeah, 5.5. I mean, of course, this is not the sunshine amount of sunshine varies, but based on the current size that we have in the application, I believe after the reduction and with the increased buffer, we came to about 4 megawatts, and if you multiply by 1300, which is about the number used in the number of kilowatt hours per kilowatt, 4 times 1300, that gets you around 5.2, make it 5.5 million kilowatt hours. I don't think that we will produce more than that. It's unless you have sunny days every day of the year. So
can I just stop you for a second? So initially we were talking about megawatts, right? So I had 4.7 megawatts, and you're saying that with these changes that Mr. Rosati just made with this latest iteration, you're down to 4 megawatts. Is that correct?
that is correct. And Chris, you can correct me. Yes, that is correct.
So, and then you're saying that 4 megawatts translates into 5.5 million kilowatt hours?
Correct. And again, my apologies. Unfortunately, the world of electricity is a little complicated. So you have really 2 units here. One is the watts and the other one is the watt hour. It's a little bit like energy versus, how do you call it, capacity. I don't want to be technical here, but
so I
just
wanted to be clear, because like when we were
Yes.
talking 5.5, I'm like, I don't have that number. And then when I'm listening to you, I'm realizing that it's a different unit. So we went, Mr. Rosati, if I could just quickly ask you, we went from 4.7 to 4. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's 4.06 if to be 100%
Okay.
to the 100th decimal
That's where
point.
we are. That's where we are now.
Correct.
And then based on the math, that translates to 5.5 million kilowatt hours, which is what Mr. Delali was talking about, correct?
Yes.
I just want to be clear because people are going to ask that question. So I just want to make sure. Okay, I'm good. Thank
Jennifer,
you.
I think in the last iteration you may have seen the number of 6.5 million, if I'm not mistaken, and that was from the old larger system. So if you want to sort of keep track of those numbers, that's sort of how it has evolved.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be clear on where we were. That's all.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
So, and then just to add on to it, so with the panels, so when you say 85 to 90% are recyclable, so that's of a typical panel, 85 to 90% of the components are recyclable in that, or is it 85 to 90% of typical panels are fully recyclable, and then there's some other type 10% which aren't fully recyclable? Can you just clarify that? For the board?
The rest. So yes, the total panel in a box, 85, let's say, % of it is aluminum, glass, silicon, and then the rest of it, it's copper, silver, some plastic for the cover of the junction box. You may have a back sheet that's in plastic, but it's again, there is very little amount that would be considered to be not as widely spread as you have aluminum or glass or silicon. Those are really basic commodities that you can find obviously anywhere.
Okay, so and then just to piggyback on that, Mr. Alfieri, and I believe there was testimony in prior hearing that the applicant agreed, obviously they provide a full decommissioning plan and report to the board, and then also agreed to any bonding requirement to cover, like, down the line, full decommissioning, correct?
Correct, 100%.
And then there was, and I can't remember if the applicant fully committed to it, but there was a question from the board regarding, obviously the significant amount of tree clearing. I know they're making contribution up front for that tree clearing. There was some questions from the board regarding future reforestation of the site. Is the applicant still amenable to that, if that's something that the board is, inclined to request from the applicant, Sal?
I have to, Chris, on the decommissioning plan, did we address any reforestation?
I don't believe so. I'd have to look it up.
All right, we're going to check. I think we agreed. At an earlier meeting, we didn't agree to reforest. We agreed to stabilize and put grass or other type of plantings, but not to reforest it.
Yeah, so I would definitely keep that in the back of your mind as the rest of this proceeding goes, and as you hear public comment, and then obviously I'll let it for the board to fully opine. I think there was discussion on that. I don't know where we fully landed, but obviously it's a use variance application. So any additional positive criteria, would be important for any use variance application.
Okay.
Sherry,
I mean, like Charlie said, they definitely, we didn't finish the conversation on that as far as if they were going to be reforesting. One of the comments I did have in my letter that Chris did agree to, the area that they're planting on lot 18, some of the trees they're going to be, or they're planning on using are small, as in they just don't get very tall due to the shading, issues that they have. So one of my suggestions was they could provide, instead of a 2.5-inch caliper tree, provide some smaller like whips that you would use for reforestation, that if you're expecting this to last 20 years or so, that maybe an oak tree installed as a whip 20 years from now still won't be shading that. So they could actually start reforesting rather than just only planting like an ornamental tree in that lot 18. So I was going to try and get some species that will be, valuable and should be there, but we'll just install them at a much smaller size.
Right, and we agreed to comply with that comment.
is that it, Sherry?
Yeah, that was all the discussion currently.
Okay. Hey, I'm gonna go straight to Paul.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Mazia,
Please.
Some of the other questions I had were relative to the capstone micro turbine, the vanadium redox flow batteries, how you talk about what you're doing for New Jersey natural gas. Why does it have to be just solar panels only? Why can't it be a complete comprehensive solution that gives New Jersey natural gas the best fight in their life when it comes to energy supply?
Well, Mr. Saya, I mean, look, I cannot agree more with you. In fact, I invite you, it's public information. We have a gazillion applications for battery storage projects in New York. It happens that in New Jersey, you do not have yet the incentive and regulatory environment to push for batteries. It's coming, it's on its way, but it's not there yet. So, and again, even if the battery incentives were there, we could not replace the solar panels with batteries because the batteries only store the energy. They don't produce the energy. So I am more than in favor of putting batteries. Trust me, it's great. But at this moment, I'm not a magician. I can't make the numbers work.
Okay, so, yes, the batteries do store, but they also produce 6 hours at a time, right? So when you cascade them, you can go 6, 18, 12, 18 hours, 3 batteries, depending on the solution that you use. When I say comprehensive, I mean solar panels, batteries, and of course, a micro turbine turbine to go ahead and recharge those batteries in the event that you have tremendous cloud cover for a couple of days and so forth. I appreciate your honesty, and it's great. And for you, Charlie,
if I can add to,
go ahead.
Yeah, if I can add to, so look, if you ask me, the way I see the world in few years is solar panels everywhere, batteries, electric cars, electric buses, trucks. This is the way the world is gonna be in 5 to 10 years. And there is a path to get there. It's not gonna happen overnight. I think we have to make a transition slowly but surely. And, everyone has to work together and sometime make compromise. And hopefully, but yes, there are new technologies that are developing. Your idea of vanadium is great. I looked into it. In fact, I may use it. It's pricey right now because you don't have scale yet to make the price points work. Lithium is the most inexpensive for high density batteries. Otherwise, you can use lead acid or carbon lead. They are more inexpensive. But if you were to just use batteries, all you could do here is to put the batteries, charge them at night, for example, from the grid, and then discharge the batteries during the day. You have not really removed any carbon, reduced any carbon emissions. You basically just delaying the movement of those electrons from the grid to the New Jersey natural gas plant. That's all you're going to be doing. Unless one day, hopefully, we can just completely phase out that natural gas plant and just have solar panels with batteries that could, heat up people's homes with electric heat. That is going to happen as it's in its way in New York State, for example.
Let me interrupt. I think what Mr. Saya is saying is reduce the size of the array that's there using batteries to store that at the time that it's not drawing off of that array. Store the power in that battery to feed the plant at night, and then during the day it recharges itself. I don't think Mr. Saya is saying really to produce the power. Am I correct, Mr. Saya?
Yeah, I'm just talking about a comprehensive solution. We're here in New Jersey. Mazir's, he's honest. He's forthright. New Jersey is not leading the way.
No.
And we don't give the opportunity for us to go ahead and come up with these comprehensive solutions at price points that make sense. You got Dr. Saldaway up there in Cambridge working the Ambry battery, major investors, including Bill Gates and others. And so there's competition. There's going to be something in the future. And right now, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the honest discussion and the testimony, and that's what's important. Thank you. I have no more questions, sir.
Okay, Mr. Cantor.
Mr. Chairman, just probably a basic and maybe stupid question. The full array is producing power during the day. It's going into the New Jersey natural gas facility with no batteries. Where does the unused power go?
Into the grid.
Can I address that? That's an excellent question. So this is what is clever about this, the way this is done. And first of all, New Jersey is actually great. It's one of the top, probably 3 states in the country in terms of solar panels per square foot. So and New Jersey put my company in business, so I would never say bad things about New Jersey. Having said that, there are many reasons for which it does not follow the same path as other states, and you don't have batteries quite yet, but it will happen. And I think you will all be very pleasantly surprised. With regard to your question, Mr. Cantor, so back 10 years ago, when the legislators in New Jersey wanted to push for solar, they were limited in the amount of technology and funds available. So they realized that let's use the grid as the battery. So in a whole neighborhood, you're gonna have consumption, but you know what? When you wake up in the morning, somebody is asleep. And when you average out 2 people's consumption, that's what matters. So you can just export the power if the New Jersey natural gas does not use the electricity. Those electrons are going to go to you. The New Jersey natural gas's plant or meter is going to record the credit. And then later at night, for example, when the plant needs to push some gas into the network and they need to use electricity, their meter is going to go forward and is going to use those credits that they accumulated in the morning, and those electrons are going to come back through the plant. So the grid acts as a battery, and it's a very clever mechanism, and it's great, and so that's how it works out.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Mr. Hughes.
Yeah, piggybacking on that, my understanding was that this really wasn't a net metering situation, but it is then if there is overpower.
It is a net meter, absolutely. We are behind the meter, and the meter is bidirectional. So if it exports, it gets a credit. If it's import, the credits are used. That's why it cannot exceed 110% of the annual consumption of the plant.
Oh, yeah. I understand because I actually have solar on my house. For some reason in this whole process, I was thinking
the same. It's exactly the same as your home.
So we'll feed the grid.
Not doing anything different.
Yeah. No, my understanding was it wasn't feeding the grid, but it will if the plant doesn't use. I got you. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Moretti.
Mr. Nansen, I have a question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I had just asked this question at the last meeting. I just want to, maybe Nazir can, give a good answer on this one, because I still have a little concern in the worst case scenario that can these things have a potential for a fire where on a windy day, this could be an issue with a gas company on the other end of the wind. I just need to know what insurances could you give me and maybe the residents in the area that, the fire risk would be taken care of if that did happen.
That's I didn't get that one. I'm going to try to respond. I think that the distance between the closest solar panel and the location of the plant is just such a long distance. I'm not sure the physics would allow anything. I mean, you don't have, if we have sparkles and so on, there's clearly a problem with the design, and electricity is inside the wires. And then if there is any surge, you have fuses, you have all kinds of surge protections. So, I mean, I cannot see a scenario under which something like that could happen. It's just the distance is so long. You probably have a much bigger chance with lightning, definitely, than our solar panels.
Yeah, okay. But, I did look into it, and I know that there were some solar farms that had pretty substantial fires. So, I mean, I'm not just grabbing this out and throwing this in, as a wrench to your application. I just want to make sure that some people may consider this as an issue, possibly, because last year during our fire season, we did have some, brush fires, and they can just be from the wooded areas. But I'm just, that's the only reason I'm bringing it up.
You are correct. I'm not going to deny the fact that fire events have taken place at solar farms or solar systems. Ultimately, this is going to be built according to the National Electric Code. All the pieces of equipment are UL listed. If it's been designed properly, something like that should not happen, and it will be inspected by the town inspector. Given the project size, you can imagine that layers and layers of engineers are going to review anywhere between design to ultimate installation. Now, if there is a way we can add an extra layer of safety because it's closer to a gas plant, I'm certainly happy to look into it and see what we can do to address any potential concerns. But there is already so many layers of safety built in getting such a project. Even Jersey Central is not going to allow something like this to be permitted for operation without, everything being built per code.
Okay, Charlie, did we receive anything from the fire company in Howell?
Yeah, Mr. Mertens, and I was just about to make a comment on that. So, and I'm not opining on the application one way or the other, but the applicant, when they originally filed their application, did not have any internal or perimeter circulation on the site plan. Obviously, we deferred them to the fire official. I believe they met with Fire Chief Lewis. They have provided grass access ways internal and around the perimeter of both of the rays, east and west. And I believe the applicant, if they have not already added to the plans, they agreed to provide Knox boxes or some equivalent type of measure at the gated access from Victory Road for both facilities. So it's my understanding that they have addressed the fire chief's concerns from an access perspective. And then if there is anything lingering, I just ask if the board rules in favor of the applicant agrees to address those as a condition of the approval. So any issues with that, Sal?
No, in fact, the fire official did have two minor comments. One was the knock box, and yes, we agreed early on that we would address those comments.
Okay.
So, and then while I'm unmuted, I just want to make another comment. I meant to ask it earlier, and I think it's important for the board's consideration and perspective of the application. So, Mr. Delaley, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
No problem, John. No problem.
So we talked about the total facility as a whole, 4.7 megawatt down to 4.06 megawatts, which equates to 5.5 million kilowatt hours per year. Do you have a breakdown for the east and west? If I know there was questions about if it was just built on the SED, this would be a planning board application by right. Do you know what the output of just the east array is in comparison to the demand for the New Jersey natural gas for the board's consideration?
I think it would be, I don't have my calculator in front of me, but if we were to do just the east side, it would be 3.2 multiplied, call it 1,400. So I'm guessing it's going to
Like
be
4.2 million.
Correct. Something like that.
4.2 million for the east.
For
That
the
was,
east
that was a great question, Charlie. Thank you for bringing that up.
And it was, you previously testified that the minimum for the New Jersey natural gas was 4.5 million kilowatt hours, correct? Approximately.
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Moretti.
No, sir, no questions at this time. I may say something later.
Okay, Mr. Roscoe.
No, so far so good.
Okay. Sal?
Yeah, our last witness is our planner. I'm sorry, I'm plugging my iPad in. It's losing power, so I have to bear with me 1 minute. Okay. Jim, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Andy, our planner was sworn in, qualified, and did testify at the last at a prior hearing, and I know you're going to want to re-swear him.
Just because, yeah. So do you swear that testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
And state your name for the record and spell your last.
Sure. First name is James. Last name is Kyle, K-Y-L-E, professional planner.
Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Kyle's been previously qualified in this proceeding, he can continue, in my view, he can continue to testify as an expert in professional planning.
Mr. Kyle, you provided extensive planning testimony at a prior hearing. I just want you to supplement it based upon the information that was provided this evening through the testimony of the two witnesses.
Sure, and I can do that briefly. So the D3 conditional use variances that we are seeking with this application were essentially unaffected by the changes that we've made to the plans. So just to recall, the D3 variances we need were related to minimum lot area required. 65 acres is required, and we have 28 total. That's been reduced slightly, but only 8 acres of property in the ARE 6. The other D3 variance was for the requirement to provide a PJM feasibility report. As we testified to, that's no longer required with this application as we go through the state process. And then finally, to permit a facility on areas occupied by wetlands, just recall that we are seeking
permits from the DEP that we are entitled to fill isolated wetlands under a certain acreage, and those permits are in process. The one bulk variance that is affected by the changes that we've made, as Mr. Rosati noted, was related to the landscape buffer. The ordinance requires 2 out of 3 items be provided in that buffer. One is landscaping or fencing 10 feet tall. The other is a berm 6 feet in height or a setback of 200 feet. As Mr. Rosati said, we've increased the setback to the nearest point of the panels to about 175 feet. So we do still need that relief. And recall that we did talk about the possibility of providing a landscape berm 6 feet in height. It would require the clearing of trees. We feel pretty strongly that this is a better option to not provide the berm because we can supplement with understory planting the existing buffers that we're going to leave in place, as Mr. Rosati had testified to. We'll supplement that on the inside 50 feet with lower plantings that will provide that solid 4-season screening that's required by the ordinance. So in terms of the variance, we feel that this is a better planting option because it will leave a lot of the mature woodland in place within the buffer, and then we'll supplement it with that understory planting, which we feel will be more effective.
And that's all the planning testimony, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Jennifer.
I don't take any exception to the testimony. I do recall Mr. Kyle had indicated when he testified at the last hearing about the waiver or the variance for the buffer. I would prefer, and I'm sure Shari has gone over this in detail, to keep the trees and the existing landscaping in place as opposed to clearing and creating a berm and supplementing with landscaping. I think that's more of an effective buffer than clearing it so that we could build a berm and put small plantings on it. So I don't take any exception to that relief. And Mr. Kyle had indicated that that was the only modification, correct, in the variance relief that based upon these changes. So, you know, we've heard his testimony in the past and you know, we've gone through the PJM and the other items. So I think that, you know, I'm satisfied with the testimony.
Jennifer?
Yes, sir.
Not Jennifer. Sherry. I'm looking at Sherry. Colin. Sherry.
Yeah, I agree. I certainly would like to keep what's existing out there than, you know, than burn it. So that seems reasonable for that variance.
Charlie.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could just add, I just want to remind the applicant did agree, obviously, that they're going to get any required outside NJDP approvals for the LOI, you know, TAW general permits as required. I just want to make another clarification point regarding the portion west of the railroad tracks. I think Mr. Rosati shared exhibit showing the topography of the site and the portion of the array and how there's a depressional area where a lot of the runoff drains, you know, from the area to that low point on the site. You know, if the applicant or the board were to require berming within the buffering, you know, there would be additional concerns regarding stormwater runoff. Where does that flow then go? So I take no exception to the granting of the relief of the berming requirement.
Thank you. Mr. Cantor.
Questions?
Questions of the planner.
I have no questions for the planner.
Mr. Hughes.
I have no questions for the planner. I just wanted to clarify something I should have grabbed before. When we talked about going from the eastern array being 4.2 million kilowatts, did I hear Charlie ask a question about that this requires a minimum of what, 4.5 was it?
That's
For natural?
correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank
New
you.
Jersey
That's-
natural gas has a minimum of 4.5 million
Okay.
kilowatt
All
hours.
right. All right. Yeah, sorry for not getting that earlier, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Moretti.
Nothing for the planner.
Mr. Mertens.
Just to clarify one thing, maybe Jennifer, the planner, could answer this question. The west side would not be cleared until there is a permit to go under the transit line that's there.
That's correct.
That's the testimony that they provided to us, yes.
Okay, that's all I have.
Hey, Mr. Roscoe.
No,
Mr. Sale. Okay. Okay, sir.
Mr. Nansen,
you.
that concludes, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Saya.
Oh,
No, I'm good. It's all yours.
Oh, thank you.
Can I ask a question on that with the clearing? Do you expect to get that approval to cross much later, or are you really planning on doing this in 2 clearing operations?
Definitely 2 clearing operations, definitely.
Okay.
Now, from a legal perspective, if you don't get approval on the west side, then you wouldn't be able to meet the minimum requirements of New Jersey Natural in terms of in terms of the 4.5 million kilowatts. What would happen as a result of that?
They, as the witness testified, any excess that was required, they would get their normal power source from JCP&L.
But it would seem to be below the minimum, though, is my point.
Well, yes, there would be, yes. But it would supply, you're freezing, Andy, that's.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I hear you fine.
Mazir, go ahead, you want to answer that?
My apologies if I'm interrupting. There is one point that I was told may not have been clear enough about the 110%. It's 110% of the maximum past 12 months. So, if I have bills showing 12 million kilowatt hours, I could go all the way to 110% of 12 million kilowatt hours. That's the way the BPO rule is. So at 5.5 million kilowatt hours, we are way below what is allowed by the BPU.
Right, I think the question was, if New Jersey Transit fails to give you permission to cross, to go under, and therefore you clearly can't implement the west side, the east side, as we learned earlier, is only generating 4.2 million kilowatt hours. That's not even hitting the minimum. We're not talking 110% of 12 million. We're saying if you're representing 4.5 million kilowatt hours is the minimum, and the west side or the east side is only generating 4.2, what happens when you don't generate even the minimum?
It's not a big deal. I've done shopping centers, I put solar panels, and the grocery store is using 20 times what the size of the solar panels was that I put on the roof. It's okay.
To that end, I guess the general question would be, and I'm just going to ask it, is, we're here because you need variance relief for the west side, which seems to have been the focus because solar is permitted on the east side. If you're telling me you could create 4.2 million kilowatt hours on the east side and that's fine, why should the board consider allowing you to implement a solar array on a large lot residential piece of property that could have one house? We were under the impression, and maybe it was my mistake throughout the course of these hearings, that the project won't work unless you have both sides operating. And now we're being told it's no big deal. So why should we give you a use variance? Why shouldn't we just tell you to do the east side and go to the planning board and build it as of right and provide them with what you can?
That's a great question, Ms. Beam. And so there are a couple of ways to address that. One is that, of course, when you develop a project like this, you're trying to maximize the potential production. It happens here that there are some economic considerations that got into play between the east side and the west side parcels, and in the transaction that is involving the landlord, and so the project cost and the economics of the projects are such that I'm not going to bore you with fixed cost and so on. We can go to that detail. So you're trying to build the largest possible project to spread over those fixed costs, and ultimately we're trying to reduce carbon emissions. So it's also the other consideration. If you want to reduce the maximum amount of carbon emissions, and so you build the largest possible array. So I mean, it's a long answer, but sorry, that's what I
No,
could
I
offer.
understand. I mean, I would just say that the financial implications is something that the board really can't take into consideration. So that we have to leave aside. I mean, that's a business decision on your end. That really has nothing to do with the land use decisions the board are making. And I guess the board is going to have to decide whether the benefits of, reducing whatever the carbon emissions, et cetera, is worth, and they're going to balance that out at the end of the day. But it's good to know, I mean, from my perspective, that they're not married together, because that was my impression to begin with. So, the board, I guess, is have to decide at the end of the day. I mean, obviously we have to open things back up to the public, but,
Jennifer,
it's not only one-sided. Also please realize that, and I'm sure, I mean, I don't know about, I live in New York City. I invite people to look at the web. The last month, some people in New York City had their electric bill triple. They were paying $100 the month before, they end up with $300. Why? Because natural gas prices are going up. And so, ultimately, by reducing reliance on fossil fuels will benefit the entire system and everybody. Does it mean that you will get less dollars to pay on your bills tomorrow or next month? I don't know. It's a complicated calculation, but you can see that, reducing reliance on fossil fuels ultimately should be the long-term goal for everyone.
Mr. Bayer?
I'm kind of confused myself on this here.
Hang on, guys, hang on. Mr. Bayer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If we move forward with this application and they do not get that railway underground pipe or for the cable, what does that do with this application if that can't be built on the west side?
Well, that would be like subject, Mr. Chairman, to, I mean, like any approval you would give would be subject to other outside agency approval. So if there were environmental constraints or, it would be subject to DEP.
No,
right?
I'm worried about jurisdiction.
Well,
so if they can only build on the east side and the east side is a permitted use,
yeah,
the approval before this board remain valid if we considered the totality of the project, but it was conditioned upon an outside agency that didn't come through.
Yes.
And I'm still confused, Jen. Maybe I know is the fact that the east side can generate enough of electricity to run the program. Is this correct?
No.
Oh, so
I need to get this legal question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman. I'm sorry.
We need to get jurisdiction. If they're not able to build that west side, how does that affect jurisdiction with this case? Since then it's going to be totally in a permitted use. Mr. Bayer?
Andy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So I go back to if you can't build a project, well, I see what you're saying. I think it could risk voiding the approval if they don't get the agency approval on the west side.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, it's I mean, we've thought about this. Our position is that that if the western array can't be built due to some failure of an outside agency approval, we still think the board had jurisdiction properly when the approval was granted, and we don't think it jeopardizes the approval. But it's a very interesting and unique argument. I'm not sure any of us know for certain what the answer would be. if a court were to review it.
Yeah, that's why I want to put that question out there.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
and that's the reason why, I would prefer to see a complete comprehensive solution, right? That eliminates, any concern there. But as Mr. Delelli has indicated, New Jersey's a good state, great state for solar panels, but maybe not implementing that complete solution just yet. So it's solar panels that we're relying on. And, that's where we stand.
Yeah, but see, Mr. Saya, my dilemma is
He froze.
Yeah, I think we lost Wendell.
So I probably can summarize it and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but what we've heard is that the enabling and Sal, you're gonna have to correct me. In order to implement the project on the west side, you need that approval from New Jersey Transit, right? To go under the railroad.
Correct.
So the question becomes, Mr. Saya, if they don't get that approval from the railroad and the west side can't get built, understanding it's just solar panels that we have on the east side is SCD and it's a permitted use. So if they just came here on the east side, they would have gone to the planning board. They wouldn't have come before you. The west side is what brought them here. So the question becomes, if they're unable to build the west side for failure to get that outside agency approval, what happens to the approval on the east side? And I think it's complicated. It's definitely something we need to look into. And I guess it's going to be up to the applicant whether they want to take the risk or not, right?
Right. And yeah, and we've thought this through and we understand the risk, and we feel that the key is that whether the board has jurisdiction tonight to act on the application. If we can't meet a condition later, I don't think it impacts the approval.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add something too, and I'll defer to Sherry on this because I think it might have come up on some other projects that are phased. Obviously, the tree contribution calculation is based off of the total area clearing. The applicant should probably revise the calculation for the two phases if it's not already done so that way, it's easy for the townships on that perspective to discern between the two.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have done that with payment in phases. So since you're going to clear into operations, you might as well split it then.
That's good. Thank you.
Understood and agreed.
And to just get back to the one point that Jennifer raised earlier about if the west doesn't get developed, and then there'll be a lesser amount of power that's generated from the east, it's still a reduction in the amount of power that New Jersey Natural Gas is getting from JCP&L. And the west section it's a conditional use, so it's not D1, it's D3. So it is contemplated that in that zone there would be potential solar arrays. It's just that we don't meet those two conditions, one being 65 acres and we're only 8. So they contemplated a much larger facility than what we're proposing in that zone.
Hey,
Wendell, you're back?
yes, am I here?
You froze for a minute.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay,
That concludes our presentation, Mr. Chair.
okay.
Mr. Chair, do we want to take 5?
Yeah, I want to take 5. I have to.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
Eileen?
Eileen, we'll take 5 minutes and then we'll open to public.
Eileen, you're muted.
How-
Eileen, you're muted. And she's gone.
Y'all still hear me or?
I
Hello?
think Eileen had to mute herself.
You still hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
The meeting will take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 9:37. The meeting will now reconvene.
Thank you. Okay, yes.
So Sal, I just have one question.
Yes.
I know we're going around and around about like minimum usage, what's available on one side. So what I've heard is that the west or the east side can generate 4.2 million kilowatt hours. And that the minimum usage for New Jersey natural gas was 4.5. How much of that 8-acre west side would need to be developed with solar to get to the 4.5 from the 4.2? Do you know, like, area, can you calculate out the area of how much it would be?
Chris might be able to do that. Good question. Chris, can you take a minute to try and figure that out?
On it.
He's on it.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Moretti, before we went to break, you were confused.
Well, exactly what Jen's asking right now.
Okay,
How does that east side not generate enough to take care of the program? So why do they need the west side? If the east side can generate enough?
So the east side, so they're saying that the minimum usage, well, it's a range.
Right.
Depending on the season, et cetera, right? And how cold, how warm, whatever. But when they analyzed, you said last year's bills, which I guess is the exercise that's required, the range is 4.5 million kilowatt hours to 12 million kilowatt hours. So I guess the minimum usage that they've done in the course of the past year is 4.5. The east side alone only generates 4.2.
Right.
So it doesn't quite get there. So what I would like to know is how much area of the 8 acres on the west side would be needed to just hit that 4.5. That's the question I asked.
Yeah, I got you.
I piggyback on that.
One other thing. Could both sides, the west side or the east side, I know you addressed the east side, but what could be put on that west side if this is not approved?
One house.
On the west side?
Yep.
And what can be put on the east side?
A warehouse.
The east side's smaller than the west side, though.
No, the east side's bigger. The west side's 8 acres.
All right, I'm getting my sides. Hey, I was never a Boy Scout.
I think the east side's about 16 acres plus or minus.
Okay, so that could be a warehouse.
Yeah, and then the west side is in the ARE 6, so one house per 6 acres. So they could build one house, but as we talked about, it could be a homestead or a farm.
Right.
So, you know, a significant amount of the area, and under a homestead, you're talking 6 acres could be cleared. And if it was a farm, all of it could be cleared.
Right, okay.
Mr. Chair, can I piggyback on Jen's question a little bit too? It's kind of spitballing. Would it be a weird thing to like consider if the capacity on the east side could be put into the west side with maybe some variances? I mean, is that a cleaner way of looking at that or doing this, or am I crazy on that one?
I'm not really sure I understand the question.
If we were to bring those panels to the east side, and let's say there's some setback variances that maybe we'd have to give them in order to get those panels onto that piece of property to put it in a zone that works. I mean, would that make more sense in what we're trying to do, or?
Well, I think first, like, let's find out how much area we need. And then if it's a minimal area, we can figure it out. But if it's like 2-3 acres, I don't know that we would have the room to do it. So let's see what he comes up with.
And also you would have jurisdictional problems with that if it was just on the east side as well with variances.
Yeah.
That would go to the planning board.
Right. You wouldn't have jurisdiction.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that's a cleaner thing. That's what I was getting at, but okay, I got what you're saying. Thank you.
You're dealing with wetlands also.
Okay, Chris, any luck?
What I'm coming up with is we pretty much need what we're showing now.
Chris, and respectfully, the total right now is 5.5.
Hold on. Well, then hold on. I'm using it. I'm using the wrong conversion. Then hold on.
Maybe Mizir can do that. He probably knows it.
I was I didn't dare interject here. So Jen, I just want to follow your thought process here. So you're suggesting that, okay, on the east side we have 4.2 million.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep,
And the minimum usage of the plant is 4.5 million.
correct.
So the difference is 300,000 kilowatt hours.
Right.
So you are sort of suggesting that, okay, how about we consider an array on the west side that is only producing 300,000 kilowatt hours?
I'm not suggesting that. What I'm just curious is how much of the 8 acres would be needed to get that 300,000?
So I'm gonna do a quick calculation, and forgive me, my brain is not that fast. So if you
We
take
basically have to be a
300,000,
quarter of what it is now.
yeah, it's gotta be, it's about 200 and something, I would say maybe 250 kilowatt system as opposed to 800 kilowatt. It's a quarter. And so you will use a quarter of the surface area that is currently, on the drawings on the west side.
So that would mean 1 acre instead
2
of 4.
acres, 2 acres,
Now-
acres over there.
Now, I want to just make a couple of observations because, again, I'm not sure why we are relating this to the minimum annual usage of the plant. There is no particular rule out there that says that the solar system production has to be tied to the minimum annual usage. It's tied to the maximum annual usage.
I understand that. I think the concern is that the use variance component of this application is strictly on the west side. And so, and I don't mean to speak for the board, but having worked for them for years and years, there's reluctance, at least on some of the board members, or has been in the past, to grant use variances for non-residential uses in the large lot agricultural zones. So understanding the concern about tree removal, I was just curious how much of it would be. So you're talking, instead of 8, you're talking 2. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that the regulation is no more than 110% of the max, right? So it'll be 110% of the 12 million. So I totally understand that. I think we're looking at it from 2 different perspectives. And I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I was just asking how much it would take to get to that number. That's all.
So,
As a
Jen, if I could just, Chairman, I apologize. I don't want to cut you off. And just to add on to it, Mr. Rosati can clarify if I'm incorrect on this. So I believe there was prior testimony that on the west side, initially the applicant's clearing 5 acres plus or minus. They're doing an additional 1 acre of reforestation in that additional supplemental 50-foot buffer. So it's 4 acres of clearing for, plus or minus 4 acres of panels. It's going to be less because there's a circulation for fire access and things like that. So you'd be going from 4 acres of panels plus or minus down to 1 acre of panels just to meet that net 300,000 kilowatt hour difference between what the east side is providing versus what the minimum is required for New Jersey natural gas. So is that accurate, Mr. Rosati?
Yeah, I would call that a plus or minus again with the access roads and all that, but agreed. And I apologize. I was using the 5.5 number versus the 4.5. So a huge faux pas on my part. My bad.
Well, see, now you could probably get that all on the east side. But my problem is jurisdictional. If they do not, I don't care about the variance in the application. I do care about it's on that west side. But if the applicant, I know they already stated, they're gonna take the risk, but if that becomes non-buildable on that west side, they cannot get a permit for under that railroad track. I'm worried about jurisdiction.
And Mr. Chair,
yeah, go ahead, Sal.
we discussed that during the break. We're not concerned at all with getting the approval. It's the timing to get the approval from New Jersey Transit. In fact, the application was made some time ago and everything was positive. We just haven't pushed it because we wanted to get through this process. So we don't think there's any risk at all. It's just a timing issue, not a permitting issue.
Okay,
I confirm that we have gone through the process. It's actually Conrail has already approved it. I just need New Jersey Transit, and it's the same sort of parameters for approval. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
If y'all are comfortable with that, then can I have a motion to open the public?
Motion to open the public, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that,
Second.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. At this time, Eileen will open to public
Gimbal be the first.
for comments and questions of the applicants. I want to please ask the public, please don't make your question redundant, and, you know, and try to keep it online of tonight's testimony. Thank you.
The meeting will now open to public. If you are calling in, you can press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. The first will be Betty Gimbel.
Ms. Gimbel, I'm gonna, Mr. Bear,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
swear in the witness.
Sure. Ms. Gimbal, do you swear that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do.
She is sworn, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gimbel, questions and comments? They pretty much, let's try to stay in the perimeters of what tonight's testimony has been.
Absolutely. Betty Velez Gimbel, 97 Victory Road. I own Squonkam Brook Farm, which is located directly across from the ARE site. I wanted to just begin and say I appreciate the board's efforts to preserve the environment and to try to find balance in all of this. And kudos to you. There's an enormous amount of information that we shared today. And of course, questions and concerns that I had obviously grew due to the testimony today. As I have said before, I'm unable to see how this actually benefits us, the Howell residents. The Shade Tree Commission is also in agreement in stating that's not a benefit to the town and pose a great environmental risk. The Environmental Commission also follows suit and says that this is a net loss to the town on an environmental aspect, does not agree that this should be granted. I had submitted a letter in reference to the stormwater management, and I did see that the applicant provided the aerial photo. Would you mind putting that up on the screen and zooming that in, Chris Rosati? The one with all the blue lines.
Chris, are you able to do that, Chris?
I'm trying. I'm gonna have to change something real quick. So I get full screen. Go to with the blue. Go here. There we go.
And this is a.
This is
Zoom in
exhibit.
so that everybody could see the numbers, please.
Yeah, this is exhibit 833.
Hold on 1 second. Just want to say what this is for the record. I'm sorry.
Chris, what exhibit is it?
A33, aerial map 2020 showing contours.
Okay, so you made mention and referred many times to the west side of your arrays and this project, but to the north side is where my farm is, and you can see that the 74 runs across Victory Road into my front pasture and then drops 2 feet to 72.
That 72 is along the right of way.
What is to the left?
This is actually, this contour here is a 76. The labeling we got from the Monmouth County GIS is a little tough. The 74 is this small circle and this large circle. Remember when I said our large sump area actually has a 75 to a 74? So this is a 76.
I'm sorry, I don't see 76.
They're
at all.
2 foot contours on here, not one. So there's, and not all of them are labeled. This is how we got it from Monmouth County. If you want, I could go to the one that we call grading
No, I
exhibit.
can't even see that. No
Okay.
one can really see that. I can't even see that at all.
Well,
What I
so-
know is that when you go down my driveway, you could see my driveway to the left there, right there.
Yep.
You're going down my driveway. You're not going up to 76, you're going down my driveway.
Yeah, so going.
That area in the, well, what I thought was 74, because I'm thinking that the number is in the center since you used the 74 for your center there.
So the way this is shown, see this loop contour?
Right.
That's the same elevation on either side. So
What is,
in the middle, it's higher. So we then go down and in here. So this is roughly this, our 2 sites are roughly the same elevation. So
If you go to the bottom of that, see where the 74 is, the larger one, go to the right of that a little bit.
here,
Yep, you'll see the 76. That right there at that point, that's your 76 going up. That all is 76.
yeah, all along here. And then it, kind of meshes together because there's a steep, like ditch along the railroad right of way. So the contours just pile on top of each other.
okay, so the west side, the 86, the 82, the 80 is coming into you, right? Into your
Yes.
74, and also going to go into me. Because now you're clearing that area.
No, it's not going to you. My testimony was, say in the event that where I'm waving here fills up, right? It's going to go towards this corner because as I go here, the road goes higher in elevation. It's lower here than it is up here.
So it's going to go into my corner.
Well, yeah, to the railroad track.
It goes to the railroad right of way, yes.
Okay, so then it goes into the railroad where it goes back to, and I know that someone had mentioned it's Squonkam Brook that's back there. Okay, so you're gonna have that water gush down the railroad tracks where we've already, I've been here 16 years, and in the last 10 years, that has washed out 3 times. The tracks have washed out 3 times in the past 10 years with the runoff that's there already.
Again, the testimony from us is that our site is several feet lower in the center than the surrounding area. And our calculations show that water, even in the 100-year event, will not leave our site. So we are compliant with the rules.
Okay.
The flooding that is experienced over there could be from other sources, not our lot.
What are the other sources?
There's your property, we have a high point on Victory Road all the way up here. All of this runoff goes down that way as well. We are a low point. We are not a generator of stormwater from that argument.
So with you being the low point, as I said, all that water you're saying is going into your area with those where their arrays are going to be.
Yes.
So that'll go in the 74 area.
Correct.
Where you have that hand just outside of that, where there's a 74 as well, is that 74 as well there?
Yeah, that's another like localized low point per this map. Our map is much more detailed. I'd have to look the exact contours, but we have it down to the 100th of a foot where we're measuring. This is a 2-foot contour. So the accuracy isn't as good as what we have done by our survey crews.
And where is your basin?
We don't have a basin here. We're using the existing depression, the existing sump to accept the water. We're not changing the topography over there.
Okay, because it said the existing wetlands will no longer be utilized as a sump. The site has been regraded to make the wetlands area that is to be filled a high point, which will direct stormwater runoff to 2 separate infiltration basins. What is that?
That's on the other array. That would be over here.
Okay. And did you take a look at the papers or the documentation from the planning board with all of the issues that we've had on Victory Road?
The report from that old report that you submitted?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. His contention is there's a 27-acre drainage area draining to this low point, and I agree. But that comes from all elsewhere from our site because we are separated by this ridge that goes through here. And the water, this ridge is at elevation roughly 81. So it's 4 or 5 feet higher than our site. So the issue that engineer was talking about, they were doing some extra drainage to the west of our site on the low point of Victory Road, and we are not a contributor to that.
Okay. Does our township engineer who's on the board right now confirm that for me, please?
So what I can say is obviously the applicant, as any applicant that's a major site plan in the township of Howell and in the state of New Jersey is required to comply with the town stormwater control ordinance, which is modeled off of the state's stormwater management rules. So that requires the applicant to be able to meet groundwater recharge, water quality, rate reductions for the 2, 10, 100-year storm. So their site is compliant with their stormwater management design with all the requirements for runoff generated from their site. So anything exiting their site would be above and beyond what's required, in accordance with the township stormwater management control ordinance and the DEP regulations. So if runoff were to overtop their proposed stormwater management facilities, as Mr. Rosati indicated, it would be above and beyond what's required per the township and the state's stormwater management rules. And then as far as obviously, the representation that Mr. Rosati is putting before the board, obviously, Chris, when are these, you're saying it's county contours. Do you know the date of these county contours?
No, the LiDAR map that I had is current. That was the one, that's this one. And they're very similar.
Okay.
Again, the LiDAR contours are 1 foot contours, so they're much more accurate. And the methods are much better. But again, when you're talking 1 and 2 foot contours, the grading scheme is the same.
Yeah. So, obviously, Chris, if you can just zoom into that other exhibit a little bit closely.
Yeah.
This one here?
No, the other one that had
I'm sorry.
if you could zoom into your ridge line, not this one, the other one you had up, sorry. There's a little lag in the screen. The grading exhibit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So this one.
Yeah.
So the ridge line is this pink line here.
Yeah. Can you zoom in a little bit closer there? Yeah, so, and then zoom up to the portion where the ridge line crosses.
It's as far as it's as far up as I go.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't take exception to Mr. Rosati's testimony regarding the drainage patterns of the general area and on Victory Road. You can see, at least from this exhibit that's presented, it does appear there is a ridge line, and that anything, as we're looking at the map here, left of that line, based on the contours, drains westerly, and then anything to the right of that line would drain easterly. So any runoff generated from the applicant site, if you, Chris, keep going down lower on the page here, any runoff generated from your site is going to drain to the low point, that red contour in the center where you got your block 41, 71, block 41, lot 27 and 28. Yeah, so anything from your site and from that ridge line is going to drain to your low point. And you know, if you get something above and beyond the 100-year storm, then as Mr. Rosati put testimony to, obviously would drain to the northeast corner of your lot. And then obviously where it goes thereafter, you know, we're relying on Mr. Rosati's testimony on that. You know, there's some contour information that's a little bit spotty that's missing there. You know, it looks like from what's presented as you keep going to the top of the screen there, it would continue to run down the railroad in the swale area. But obviously without more contour details, I wouldn't be able to, you know, opine on it definitively.
Yes.
The other thing to note is also our 100-year flow calcs don't go much above the 75, okay? We still have another 2 feet in elevation. And as I zoom out, you can see the 77 contour is probably 5 times the size of volume that it would take. So I can run the numbers if needed, but I can't, I don't know what flow that would be, but it's an enormous event that would, I would call it, you know, 4 or 5 times the 100-year storm. Is it unthinkable? You know, can it happen? Absolutely. Anything can happen. But I mean, we're designed to the 100-year storm with conservative calculations. And we're also giving 2 feet of freeboard over several acres of area. That's kind of an unheard of safety valve in anything I've done in 28 years of doing this.
Can you just pull it back to the northeast of my property there, where that red line is, you said?
Here? You want that
No,
zoomed in?
My corner of my property where you're saying the water's going to run, your low part, my corner.
Here.
To the railroad, yep.
Okay.
Can you zoom in there? Because it's very difficult to see, even when I printed it out. Okay, so basically it's inward towards my fence line.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's going to go into that area and then it's going to dump in my front field and also down
No,
the
it's going to dump right alongside the railroad tracks here. Your property line is here. This right of way is rather wide. So here's your fence line. You
Yeah, I
can
have
see
a
the fence
50 foot
posts.
from the railroad track.
You have, here's your fence post here, which is, I'm assuming is you're close to your property line because it's coincident with ours. This ditch is, I don't know, 25, 30 feet off. Again, that's in a catastrophic event where the 2 foot of freeboard, the 3 or 4 times volume quantity comes in.
Okay.
I hate to say it, but my site would be the least of this town's worries if that event happens, unless it happens only above our site. It's kind of like almost a statistical impossibility.
Now, so does the railroad know that this is proposed, that you're going to run that, the storm water is going to run down there and right into the
Again,
storm?
the calculations show that we are taking care of our stormwater and nothing is leaving the site during the 100-year storm event.
Okay. All right. So I have also a couple of questions, and because as I was going through all the paperwork, I'm seeing that there are additional requests and waivers and whatnot. We do know, we're all very familiar with the ARE 6 zone being 8 acres, and that's for agricultural use or residential. We also know that in the previous meeting, there was mention of warehouse. Tonight, there was mention of the warehouse on the SED. And the last meeting that it was stated that it was highly unlikely due to the environmental impact, and also that a warehouse would need an exuberant amount of impervious surface. So, I mean, I don't want anybody to get scared about that with the.
Wait, I have to just object. You said the last meeting that was stated by whom?
It was mentioned about the possibility by you that a warehouse could go there in the SED.
Right, but who said that it's not likely to happen? Not us.
I think that there's, if I could just interject, I think that what was shown to us, and I'm not sure if it was the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, that a warehouse, there was a concept plan of a warehouse for like 250,000 square feet. And I think that the comments from myself and Mr. Cunliffe were, that's a concept. It hasn't been engineered. I don't want to commit to 250,000 square feet because we're not 100% sure what could go there when all said and done with the constraints, et cetera. I don't want to mislead you though. A warehouse is absolutely permitted on that property.
Oh, I know. I
Right.
know
So
full well what the SED zone is about.
right. So I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding that, what we were referring to, Charlie and I were, that, a concept plan is not hard engineered. It's not graded. There's no drainage design and, circulation, et cetera. So I just didn't want there to be any misunderstanding, but that's not to say something smaller than that, but still large couldn't fit on that property. I think it's about 16 acres in size. So I just want to be clear. And I think that was what was asked of me tonight, what could go there. Any of the SED uses are permitted, and one of which would be a warehouse. So it wasn't a threat or anything. It was just answering a direct question.
Right, and I understand, Ms. Beam, that, yours was not meant as a threat, but it was used as a scare tactic by the lawyer, in my opinion. So I'll move on from there. As I said, the ARE6 zone is what I'm most interested in, because they're asking for a variance for that. In addition, I found that they also made mention with the subdivision of the 8 acres to join to the property of New Jersey Natural Gas in order to bypass another ordinance. And then there's also the PJM feasibility report required to tie into the grid, which also I believe one of your board members, I don't want to misspeak, Mr. Hughes, was also confused as I was as to whether or not they were connected to the grid or not. And now we've got confirmation that they are. So when I did my research regarding the PJM feasibility study, and I just wanted to know why the applicant is saying that it's not needed. No longer needed. Why is it no longer needed?
And Mr. Chair, we can have the applicant answer that question, but we're covering items that were discussed meetings ago, not tonight. So I mean, I don't know how much latitude you want to give, but we can certainly answer the question.
Well, I believe we did have that question come up tonight, as far as, behind the meter or this, Mr.
Mr. You want to answer?
Yeah, that was raised, Sal.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not in the context of the relief that's being sought. It was
No,
just, but we're wasting time of debating it. We have no problem answering the question. I'm just laying the foundation for additional questions if they come up that are not from this evening. Mazir, do you want to respond to that question?
Please reformulate it precisely.
The question was the relief we're seeking in the ARE6 zone about the feasibility report that's required, and we testified previously that it's not applicable to this type of system.
Yeah, it's not applicable. PJM is a program that no longer exists in the state of New Jersey, and you can only do a net meter. This is what we're doing, and so can't do a PJM grid tied project. I mean, you can, but it's economically not viable to my knowledge, and I haven't heard of anyone doing that in a while.
I think the question is, and I don't mean to speak for the resident, but there was testimony, and I don't want to go all the way back, but there was testimony that because this is a behind the meter installation, a PJM approval is not applicable to direct tie into the grid. I think the confusion lies in the clarification that came today. What happens if all the power is not used? And the comment was it goes into the grid. So I think that there's a confusion on number one. Let's take the economics out of it, right? Because let's just take that out of it. There was representations made that it's not applicable based upon the type of project that this is, because it's a behind the meter installation. So that's number one, is the first question. And you can correct me at any time, Ms. Velez Gimbal, if what I'm saying is not what you were intending. So number one, is it or is it not applicable to what you're proposing here? And number two, the comment was because it's not a direct tie into the grid, or that was what was made before, but there was representations by you that it is going to go into the grid if there's excess power, and how that plays into the approval from the PJM as well. Is that a fair assessment of what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Look, our project is no different from the thousands and thousands of house projects that are out there. It's exactly the same. I think one of the board members has solar panels on his roof, and the solar panels on his roof, if he's not home on a Sunday morning, he doesn't use electricity, the power goes to the grid, and then he gets a credit for that. And at night, there is no sunshine, he uses that credit. It's the same exact. So, you know, I don't understand. Why would it work? Why would it be okay for houses, but not for this plant? It's the same exact thing.
So you're misunderstanding the question. The question is, does what you're proposing require PJM approval? Yes or no? Okay.
No.
Is that because you're tying in behind the meter to New Jersey Natural Gas?
Okay. Correct.
That's it.
And excess power that's generated, which I'm highly doubtful will even happen given the size of this, you know, based upon what you told us. But assuming if excess power is generated, it goes into the grid, and then New Jersey Natural Gas would get a credit, which is why you're limited to 110% of their max usage, right? Because you can't just,
Absolutely.
so because it's still a behind the meter installation, even though at some point power may go into the grid, PJM is not applicable to this project. Yes or no?
Jen, you did
first-
a great job. That's correct.
It's not my
Yes.
first rodeo. So I don't know if that satisfies your question, but I think that is what we're going to get out of it. Right, Sal? Did we lose you?
Yes. No, I'm here.
All right.
So,
and Jen, forgive me, can I just address an important point you?
Please don't.
Okay.
Ms. Kimball, does that answer your question?
well, not really, because,
Listen, a PJM is not required.
right, I understand that.
That's it.
So it's being tied behind the grid or whatnot. Do they have already an agreement with New Jersey Natural Gas, a legal agreement? Like this is going to be guaranteed that this electricity is for New Jersey Natural Gas and not just to go back into the grid?
Yes.
And that could be a condition of approval. It's stipulated from day one that that was the purpose of this power.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my other question is also actually the variance with the buffers and screening that was addressed by your planner. So that's another somewhat of a variance, because as a farm across the street, I'm looking at the buffer and screening as a 50-foot 4-season buffer to farmland. And also fencing or walls at least 10 feet high and a landscaped berm at least 6 feet high. So from my understanding, that's a 6 feet. Well, first of all, you've got to have the buffer, then the 6 foot high, then the 10-foot high fence.
No.
So that would be for your planner, Chris. I'm not sure what his name was. I apologize.
Jim.
Jim Kyle.
Jim. Yep, Jim Kyle.
Yes, I'm here. So we're required to provide 2 of those 3 items. So we could provide a 6-foot berm and then a 10-foot high landscape treatment or fence at that point. Or we can set back the closest point 200 feet. So it's 2 of those 3 are required under the ordinance.
And what are you proposing?
We are proposing to meet the buffer requirement with what we're proposing. So we're providing, and we've increased that to 150 feet of buffer along the west and north side. And then we're requesting a variance to not provide the berm or the 200-foot setback.
But you're also putting a fence?
There is a fence around the installation, correct?
And how high is that fence?
I'll have to have Mr. Rosati answer that.
7 feet.
Okay, and then the other was the required replacement of trees. In the paperwork I was reading that you're not compliant. Is that still accurate?
I think the confusion lies in that the way the tree replacement works is that if you're not replacing 100% of the trees on site, you have to seek the waiver to pay into the fund, and then Shari calculates out the payment. So it appears like they're not complying, and it's really just kind of a technical waiver to allow them to pay. And I will say that almost every single application that we get seeks this waiver because they can't replace on site what they take down. So it's really just saying, can we pay you? And then we say yes, and then Shari calculates the fee, and then they put the fee into the fund.
Okay. All right. I believe that I have, there was one more thing that my husband, well, I'll just say it's for me. So just in terms of the solar panels and what Mr. Saya was working towards, more of a comprehensive approach, and looking at, just how technology has, it's ever changing every single day. So 5 years ago, a 3x5 panel would produce 85 watts, but today it's producing 315. So it's almost as if, we are continuing to put up all of these solar panels when there are going to be in the near future better ways, rather than knocking down all of these trees, and risking the habitat loss, the threatened endangered species, my land value, property value. It's just an immense impact. And as I said, your other commissions also agree and have requested this not be approved. So I would hope that, and you were able to find balance before. I'm just hoping that now that we can just deny this altogether, honestly. But I really would like you to uphold the ARE 6. Oh, my other question you mentioned, I'm sorry, Jen Beal, you mentioned that with the ARE 6 across from me, that if a farm goes in there, they can clear all the trees, even the wetlands?
Wendell, you know this better than I do.
Yes, you can.
Oh, so I have wetlands on my property. You're saying that I can clear them?
There's no wetlands on lot 8.
They don't have wetlands.
On the 8-acre piece, there's no wetlands on the west side array. There's no wetlands.
Okay.
That was the argument.
But yes, if you're using it for your livestock or anything, it can be cleared. You have to get certain permits, but it can be cleared.
I wouldn't do it because there's so much beautiful stuff back there. So
I know.
Again,
if you were a dirt farmer and farming it for vegetables and things, you are allowed to do that and to farm it.
Right. Okay. Well, again, I thank you for your time. And have a good night.
Is there anybody else?
Candace Dovenero.
Yes, next is Candace Dovenero.
Do you want me to swear her, Wendell?
Yes, please.
Yes. Do you swear that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Ms. Cabanero.
You're muted. You're muted still.
I'm not muted.
I am. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was.
Oh, here you are. Do you swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. The witness is sworn.
Thanks. So my concerns and questions have to deal with the toxicity of the solar panels, not exactly the solar panels, but the galvanized posts and brackets that are attached to the solar panels. Okay, and what it's going to do to the ecosystem, and the fact that we have Is it 11,000 individual panels that are in place or going to be placed? Can you confirm that?
90, a little over 9,500.
Oh, because you wrote 11,000.
The revised plan, because we reduced the array, it's less panels.
Okay, I understand. But the galvanized posts and brackets will produce a high density and concentration of zinc into the ecosystem, which goes into the water. We have a high water table. And I do appreciate that. I want to say thank you to the board because I went back and watched the November meeting. I was not aware of it due to the fact that I wasn't informed because I am 600 feet from the site, not 200. So Sherry, thank you. I do appreciate your knowledge of, I'm a forester. My property is forestry assessed. So I really love the trees. I do have animals on my farm as well. I have chickens, a pig, 2 goats, and a partridge in a pear tree. So yes, I do value all of the wildlife around. I name the deer. But I just wanted to go into what's going to happen with the toxicity of these brackets and posts that are going to be in a highly concentrated area. And since my basin, my pond is ground fed, it's about 25 feet deep. I want to say it's 100 feet long and probably 75 feet wide. And that's a guesstimation. I could go off the survey and get the exact measurements, but I want to say it's considerably bigger than that, especially during heavy rain, it will breach. So I know that that water is coming from other places because I don't have flooding in my house or on any parts of my property. That zinc is going to come in to my property, which breaches right near my chickens. And zinc, as we all know, is a toxin to invertebrates and some birds. Birds eat invertebrates, okay? And this is going to ecologically destroy the primary consumers of the invertebrates. And it's going to collapse our ecosystem in 25 years. That's my issue. Because you know what? I'm going to live for 25 more years. And I don't want to see this happen to Howell Township. I bought this property because it is a beautiful place to live. The street is agricultural and residential, except for Stavola's concrete, which honestly does not bother me. It's not an active concrete site all the time. That is the only business on the street that I've seen. So my issue is, have we taken into consideration about the zinc toxicity to the wildlife and the ecosystem that surrounds it and by the groundwater? And by the way, one second, I do want to say, Sherry, thank you very much for, asking for the pollinator-friendly seed mix that will be also contaminated by the zinc. And that's what I'm getting to. Pollinator, birds, bees, everything pollinates. It's going to be contaminated.
Ma'am, let's keep this to what.
I think
we might have lost Wendell.
You froze, Wendell. But I would just say, let's let them answer the question and then we can go from there.
Thanks, Jennifer. I always need that little stop thing. I'm a teacher. Sometimes I
broke up.
But Mizir, you want to respond to that while Wendell's getting back?
Yes, I mean, Mr. Venero, look, I see your question and your concern. I mean, all I can tell you is that I'm not aware of, such an issue. We have seen, God knows, millions of solar panels installed over, the posts that you are referring to. And you have that kind of fencing along every road, galvanized steel. It's just everywhere. I cannot imagine for 1 second that the regulators would allow, those installations to take place if they were so unsafe. My apologies. I just don't. I mean, I have not seen this before. This is it's. I'm not aware of such an issue.
I understand that. You live in New York City. We live in Howell Township, so a fence which would be not a high density concentration of zinc, is not really going to cause an issue. What you're talking about is 15 plus, if you do manage to get the west side, that's a considerable amount of land that will have a very high density of zinc, which is a toxin. So that's something that is a big concern to me. The second concern that I'd like to bring up is, have we talked about recycling of these? I know that it was brought up before, the recycling of these panels.
Yes.
Because recycling these panels, you kept stating that in other states, it's done. It's not done in New Jersey. It is so expensive in New Jersey, and it's not likely to happen anytime soon. So right now, I mean, I pulled up several different numbers. Right now, they say it's like 6 cents a kilowatt times 450 watts times 11,000. And then if we go for 25 years and you do at a minimal rate of inflation of 2%, which right now inflation is about 6.5%, you do the math. We're talking close to $1 million or more. Are you willing to put up a bond with that amount of money to make sure and ensure that when these panels are done and need to be recycled or removed, that bond will be available to have that happen? And in addition to destroying all of the trees that you plan on removing and the ecosystem.
You gotta let them answer the question.
It's difficult.
So Mazir would have to, I know we have a decommissioning plan, and I think in that plan there is a bonding requirement. As far as the trees are concerned, the applicant's going to be paying to the town, once Shari does her calculation, in excess of $500,000 in lieu of replanting trees that could be used by the town to plant elsewhere. So there's a significant payment going to the town by ordinance.
Well, if we were following the ordinance, we wouldn't even be here right now.
Okay.
Well, that I answered your question. I don't know how.
Thank you, Mr. Alfieri.
You may not like the answer, but.
You want me to answer the other? I mean, again, for the recycling, I invite everyone to Google. You will see that the state of New Jersey has an office to recycle solar panels, and they are developing policies and so on. And I think that if you come back in a year or two, they will hear voices like yours. You have very valid concerns, and there will be more and more strict requirements at the state level for solar panels to have an end of life that's not going to lead to contamination. So I don't disagree with you on that front, but there are measures being taken right now on that particular topic.
I believe you're referring to the Solar Panel Recycling Commission, correct? Which
that's one of them. Yeah.
This is exactly where I got my information. Exactly. It was a meeting that was held with them, and you can refer to the May 24th, 2021, where this has been brought up. Exactly. New Jersey does not recycle these. You actually talked about third world countries buying our recycled solar panels.
Okay, I want to interrupt. Do you have any other technical questions? The board understands that. We know that, and I don't want to keep.
I understand.
I got to move the meeting on.
I understand. We were just given a list of things that we could talk about, so I decided to talk about toxicity and recycling. And I would please implore the board to investigate this. I also did not, I know that they asked for a waiver of the environmental impact study. I did not receive that, and I did not see that document. I know it is a costly document, but I really feel it's necessary if you're going to take away a residential area and make it into something that's not residential. That's my last statement. I do appreciate all of your time.
So the environmental, are y'all asking for a waiver of that?
No,
Right.
we
You
supplied
provided
it. It's Exhibit A7, Environmental Impact Statement dated 9/29/21.
Yeah, it is.
And we had the
And it was updated in December.
And we had the environmental expert testify at the first hearing as well.
Okay, I missed the first hearing because I wasn't notified because apparently I'm not close enough, even though your groundwater comes to my property.
Right,
And
but the MLU, I agree, but I just gotta stop you. The
ahead.
MLUL requires notice within 200 feet. There have been other towns that have tried to expand that area but beyond 200 feet and have been struck down by the court. It's 200 feet. I understand the concern. I mean, respectfully, this has been all over Facebook for months and months and months. So it's always noticed on the agenda, it's on the website, and there's notice in the newspaper when this first started. So I get that you're outside the 200 feet and that's unfortunate, but it's not their obligation to notify everyone in Howell. 200 feet is the law. And that's what they've done. And the board has taken jurisdiction based on that.
Okay, the other thing, what side?
Oh,
I'm on the west side. I'm literally 600 feet. I own lots. How do I not know this right now? I believe it's 42, lot 34, 36, and 41. So I have 9 acres.
What's?
I think he's asking me where I'm located. So I'm on the west side.
Wait.
Side of it? Hello?
You're frozen again.
There he goes. Now you're muted.
I don't know. Optimum is very sucky tonight. What side of Victory are you to this location? Are you
I
on?
am west.
You're west, so you're up over the ridge.
No.
Yeah.
On the same side, she's on the same side of the road as us.
Yeah,
Just
but
down farther, like down farther to the north than the site.
And my property does get a lot of the runoff, hence the
no,
man-made.
how can you? The ridge, you would have to be right on the property line of this property. If you look at the type of topo, there's 86.
He actually cut off, right? So my property runs behind 86 and it is lower there. And there is a high water table and my pond does breach and fill and it is ground fed. So all of that zinc is going to all of the, there's.
I understand, but if Mr. Rossetti could pull that one map up there, you're way beyond that ridge.
I'm 500
as far as
feet.
runoff.
Not from the lots.
Chris, can you pull the exhibit up?
Yep. Hold on.
I'm very close to 28 and 27. Approximately 500 feet. And yes, my pond does fill and it's all ground fed water.
I understand that, but it's not coming from this site.
Everything else is dry except on that side. It has to come from there.
It can't. There is absolutely no way for water runoff to go to you from this site.
I am probably I don't see it. I see where the site is, and that's my neighbor with the white house. And my house is brown and I'm forestry assessed. So you will notice I'm probably where all the trees are. That's
Okay.
yes, that's where I am.
Okay, but you look at this ridge, right? It runs between you and this site. There is absolutely no way that you're getting that water off of this site.
Water flows underground. That's all. That has to be my statement.
That's the drainage is dealing with surface water. It's not dealing with the groundwater.
No, I know. I'm
But
not.
She's just saying the water flows underground. The impact associated is surface water, and they're containing it on site. I understand your concerns. Is there anything else you need to know from them? Because I get it and I understand the concern and I'm not trying to dismiss it, but we're breaching on almost 11 o'clock. If there's more stuff you need to know, they're here and we should ask them, but you know, we're going in circles at this point.
I agree. No, that's all I had to say about the toxicity and everything else. If you're satisfied, then you know, we'll deal with this as it goes. You know, he lives in New York City. He does not live in Howell Township. We have a great board, and I'm very proud of our board, and I'm proud of our town. I do appreciate your time.
Eileen, do we have any more?
No, I guess make the announcement if anybody wants to chime in.
Yeah. Is there anybody else out in the audience that wish to make a comment or based on testimony tonight, please?
If you are calling in, you could press *9 to raise or lower your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. There is no one raising their hand as yet.
Give it a few more seconds.
Oh, and can I add one more statement? Or actually, I'm going to pose a question. I think that's a little more appropriate. And then I promise I will go. I teach at 7 a.m. and I get up at 4:45. So the gentleman, they already said that they had the New Jersey Transit approved them to bore under the Conrail, as you call it, even though it's New Jersey Transit. I know for a fact that when I petitioned everyone on my street and signed up for New Jersey Natural Gas to have that line run, all of my neighbors, most of them hooked up to it. The gas company did not obtain the approval to bore under the New Jersey Transit. They didn't obtain, that's why they couldn't finish the grid. So gas stops at the railroad tracks from the west side. All of my neighbors hooked up. I hooked up. We no longer have propane or oil. Now, I know that they did not go under because they were not approved. Apparently, you have an approval that the New Jersey Natural Gas Company couldn't obtain.
We didn't say we had approval. We said we would
You
get.
did say it, actually.
Okay, we said it. I'm not going to stay with.
I'm going to stop. That's not what they said. It has nothing to do with New Jersey Natural Gas. They're tying into New Jersey Natural Gas's grid. This is connecting the two systems underneath the railroad tracks, which is a solar system that is generating energy. So they're connecting, in theory, if they can get the approvals, and they've represented that they have gotten preliminary approval from Conrail, still waiting on New Jersey Transit. It will be an outside agency approval. If they don't get it, we're done. But this is not extending gas. It's connecting the two systems so they can tie into the gas company.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful night. Happy Valentine's Day.
I have a motion to close public.
So moved.
Second?
Second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Mr. Alfieri.
Mr. Chair, before I give a very, very brief close, Mr. Delali had one response he wanted to give. Zaire, can you do that briefly?
First of all, I would like to thank everybody at the board for really reviewing this. I really sincerely appreciate that. And it's been many back and forth, and also the board professionals. Look, we understand there are concerns. We understand that nobody wants to see something like this come in their backyard. We tried everything we could to address concerns, and on the west side we increased by to up to 150 feet. I mean, I don't think anyone is going to see anything. We comply with all the water things. I think the town engineer would agree. I mean, Jen, you mentioned this earlier, that the board, some sentiments. Look, we've been flexible. We've done whatever we could. I mean, if you want to shrink it more, but I'm not sure what it's going to achieve by shrinking it more. you know, it's, you know, I just wanted to say that, you know, we've just been trying to do everything we can to make everybody happy. But we are in the solar business. We want to put solar panels, as many as we can. Some people think that it's a good thing. Maybe others don't think that way, but, you know, that's really, you know, the sort of the bottom line of it is hopefully, you know, people will see that this is a good project. Ultimately, it's not going to impact anyone really, and it's better than anything else out there. Just saying.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sal, I think that was your closing.
Yeah, it's, I just real quick, from the zoning point of view, I just want to again focus the board on the fact that from the SED point of view, we're fully conforming. The ARE6, we've now significantly buffered. We are only disturbing in the end 4 acres, which could be disturbed for other uses, including the single family house and the farming. And we think we clearly have addressed all of the professional comments, and we request that the board act favorably on the application. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further from Charlie?
Nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Jim, you anything further?
No, sir.
Sherry?
No, nothing either.
Okay. Mr. Bayer?
It seems ready and ripe for a decision by the board.
Okay. Board members, do you have any other questions or anything before we put this?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like to have the opportunity to review some of these scholarly articles that are in the Solar Panel Recycling Commission library before I take a vote on this.
Okay.
I'm going to need some time, but you know, Ms. Dovenero brought up a good point, and I need to either understand whether it's there's credibility to what she's saying, or if it's a non-factor.
Okay.
You know, that's important to me.
Okay. Any other board members?
I agree with Mr. Saya.
Okay.
No.
Sal, I been hearing just two of my board members right there. I think we ought to hold this for another vote at another night. You know, it would
Well,
be. Hello?
Yeah. He just clicked that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I need to, we have certain time constraints that I'm not sure we can move beyond. So I guess before I'm going to need for my client, it's very difficult on these virtual meetings to get it to discuss anything with the client. But assuming that we can provide the time and not ask for the vote tonight, what are we talking about in terms of next meeting and timing?
Next
Because
meeting.
that'll be a big factor.
The next
Yeah,
meeting.
the expiration date's February 28th right now.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That'd be just for the vote, right, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
there, no testimony or nothing, just for the vote.
For what it's worth, I'm ready to vote, you know, just for what it's worth.
Yeah, so am I. But I also agree with Mr. Say and Mr. Roscoe, if they don't feel comfortable voting, you know, I don't think we can. I mean, just because me and Mr. Cantor are okay with voting.
I would agree with that too, out of, you know.
Do you have another meeting this month?
No, not February.
February 28th.
February 28th.
We can do that. It just puts you on the very first.
Well, the
Mr.
board-
Chair, if Mr. Sayer and Mr. Roscoe don't vote, we don't have our 7 people.
No, they'll vote, but they might vote against it. Or, you know, it throws everybody out.
Well, the board has till February 28th in which to act, so we can't even ask you, we can't make you vote tonight. You have the right to carry us to the 28th and then vote if that's what the board wants to do.
Right, but if I don't have a full board.
I mean, you do have a full board, but Sal, you're hearing that there's at least 2 people that are not comfortable. So that would leave 5 others who have not opined one way or the other, and that's a risk. So you can either, you know, I think probably in your best interest, if they're going to put you on first on the 28th, that will give Mr. Saya and anyone else 2 weeks to research whatever they need to research. The chairman said he'd put you first on the agenda so that, you know, there'll be no further testimony. The public is closed, and then they, you know, they would make their decision at that point. That's up to you.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying. We can't force you to vote tonight either way. So if we can get on for the 28th, that would be perfect. If you put us first, we'll all be available if you have other questions.
Mr. Chair, can we quickly ask all the members that are on tonight if they have any plans on not being here? I'll be here on the 28th. Maybe that'll clear things up too for.
Yeah, I plan on being here, but I don't know right now.
I'll be virtual on the 28th. Yep.
Yeah,
well, you have to be anyway, because
we're going to be virtual anyway.
I'll be here.
28th.
Okay.
Matt's going to be here. What about you, Glenn?
I'm here. I'll be here.
Jose.
Good Lord willing, I'll be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That meant that barring unforeseen, illness or something, God forbid. But yes, everybody's planning, so that's good.
So that would be great, Mr. Chair. We would request that, I'm muted. No, I'm not. I would request if Mr. Bear can announce that the meeting be carried to February 28th without further notice, and we will be here ready to deal with whatever other questions you may have.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, can be carried to the 28th without further notice.
Okay, sir. Case number
The
BA.
application, I mean, yeah.
Case number BA 2114, IPP Solar will be carried to the February 28th with no further notice, and the extension of time is on the 28th. So
Yes, thank you all for your time again tonight.
thank you, Mr. Alfieri. Okay,
You're welcome.
is there any other business of the board? Seeing none, can I have a motion? Thank y'all for hanging out here. But can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for professionals.
Good night.
Good
night, everyone.
Bye.